Hello and good evening. Welcome back. I'm Dr. Harry Jackson. This is the Fairfax County Public School Shadow Board meeting with me as your host, Harry Jackson, on our network USANow.tv, produced by Sam Mataro. Our guests this evening, Mr. Brian Davison and Mrs. Stephanie Lundquist-Arora. Welcome.
Hi, Harry. Thanks for having us.
Hey, you're welcome. Well, welcome back. Summer's over. Kids are back at school. Brian, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's great to have the kids out of the house and learning something, hopefully. And
hopefully they're learning something. Or hopefully they're learning the right thing. Mm-hmm. So this is the second school board meeting of the year. We didn't make it in time for the first one, but a lot has happened. A lot has unfortunately not happened. And we're going to inform you, the parents, the concerned parents, of what is going on at the schools. This is a very important year because this is the year where I think most of our school board members are going to try to correct all of their mistakes over the past 3 years in hopes of getting reelected or using this position to get elected to some other office. So let's talk about this agenda. So at 6 o'clock, we're at Luther Jackson Middle School. Do we have a live feed yet of what's going on there? Do they have it, or
no?
They haven't gone online.
No, they're usually running late. They're usually
do.
Running late. Yeah.
This is where they have to come. They all plan to they congratulate each other. Hey, Brian, I noticed you've got an interesting shirt. You're muted.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have it on right now, but I wear these generally to go speak to the school board.
Racist.
Someone who wins an argument with a liberal.
That's awesome. Well, don't worry, Brian. I'll provide you top cover. Well, I see you were wearing blue. The color of the day is purple. Stephanie and I, we've been called liberal Marxists by far right, and we've been called MAGA by the left. So I think we're going with the Wonder Twins theme here. We're purple in the middle, the moderate middle, the reasonable crowd.
With the rest of the 70% of the world, right?
With the rest of the 70% of the world. So the meeting opening
purple
is
also the color for the. Purple is also for the military child. They purple it up for the military child as well.
The military children that they think are privileged.
In privilege bingo.
That they feel privileged and that they target with community schools, which we'll go into a little bit later. I've noticed in our agenda, we have on our speakers list one of the executives from community and schools. We'll talk about that and we'll bring up a map. But meanwhile, let's talk about what are they going to talk about tonight? We took a look at the agenda. Oh, is that our agenda? I think that's our agenda.
Yeah.
What we're talking about, things that we're going to cover, Sam. That's not for public consumption. We have to make it, Sam, different screen.
I'm working.
We don't want to have them know what we're thinking about.
Why wouldn't we want that? I thought we were all about. We were all about. I'm going to pull myself up. By the way, I'm behind the scenes today because I don't have all my gear set up in my new studio. But hey, so when you hear this mysterious, deep, sultry radio voice commenting with incredibly rapier level wit, that would be me behind the scenes.
Where are you joining us from, Sam?
I am in beautiful, beautiful Charlotte, North Carolina. I moved out of Nova a month ago, and my lovely wife and I now reside in this amazing city just outside of Matthews. It is just fabulous here.
That's quite a studio you have there.
Oh, you'll see more in the future.
We're gonna come down there. I mean, I'm gonna get the Answers barbecue, especially college bowl season. They still have the Meineke Car Care Bowl down there.
I don't know, man. I'm not a sports guy. You know that.
Oh, okay. Well, I am. I mean,
you want to talk music? All right.
Yes, I would talk music. Yes, if there's a music festival, I am in.
There we go.
All right.
Sam, you should have gone a few more miles across the border to get some lower taxes. North Carolina will tax the pizza side.
I am aware.
Oh, so I understand that there is a rally today outside Martin Luther Middle School. Can we bring up the picture from some of these concerned parents to show that, give some parents a shout out that are up there that are fighting against it? Sam, do you see the photo? I got it. It's right there in that comm channel.
Yes.
657. Yes.
You can keep talking. I'm grabbing it.
No, just bringing it up. We said some parents that are out there protesting. Oh, yeah, those are the parents are out there looking pretty serious. Wow. And on a related topic, let's move down to the next topic we're at. Wow. Did your kids have a lockdown drill today?
They did, Harry. They did have a lockdown drill. I find it mortifying that children have to do that. It's such a sad world we live in when that's the case. But yes, they did. I think all across the county have a lockdown drill.
Yeah, they did have a lockdown drill. Did you know that Fairfax County is actually teaching the wrong material for kids on how to respond to an active shooter? They're actually
what are they teaching? And what are they?
They are teaching basically duck and cover, where they teaching the kids to lock in place, to hide underneath their desks, or to hide in the bathroom and to hide and crouch down, which is one thing that you're not supposed to do, according to the FBI. FBI is actually putting out a new program to help schools with guidance on what they should be doing. And Sam, you want to bring up that website on the fbi.gov/survive?
Yeah, I have it.
Yeah, so this is actually for parents for correct guidance. So you may want to actually reach out. This is part of the show. We actually help disseminate correct information. If you are going to have a talk with your child, if this event ever does happen, give them the accurate information. When we bring that up, we'll go through there. So let's quickly address that, since this is kind of a serious topic. And Stephanie, if we ever make it on school board, we should probably have the FBI actually come out and train our people on how to come up with a realistic plan. So this is the active shooter resource. The first thing they talk about is run, hide, and then fight. When running, they are providing guidance to look at the nearest exit. Actually, should we actually watch the video there? Actually, that's a really good video.
Yeah, let's see it.
Yeah.
It's lengthy. I'm not going to go ahead and.
Well, we've got plenty of time. There's going to be self-congratulatory. Well, it does, Sam. It actually goes through all the correct things with run, hiding, and fighting. It really does. I mean, how long is it? It's only 4 minutes.
It's 5 minutes, yeah.
Okay, well, I think we got time. We'll be here for like 4 hours.
Yeah, they say adjourn at 9:15, and call me a skeptic, but I just think it's going to be a little bit later than that.
No, I think they're going to
9:15.
have all of 9:15. I think what will happen, like we said last time, they tried to sneak in other things in the agenda. And at the last minute, the bias instant reporting system, which
that was at like what, 11 or 11:30 p.m. That was
11:30. I mean, there have been some late meetings that even gone to 1 o'clock in the morning in some cases.
By the way, guys, I emailed them about it, and I didn't get a response from Ms. Somesh, who had introduced it. I asked what was the point of this, how is it going to be implemented, what are the details, and she didn't respond to me, which I found like a little bit disconcerting. It's a fair question, like what is this thing? And then I emailed my representative, Laura Jane Cohen, and she said something about it's to prevent something about preventing hate. It was very broad. I don't know how you prevent hate, but
on that topic, it's kind of ironic given that today is they're celebrating Constitution Day. And the bias reporting, I mean, obviously we want people to report instances of bullying and other things, but their proposed rule against, quote, hate speech is basically just a bunch of gibberish. None of these people can even define hate speech. In fact, I have one of my kids in Loudoun, and they have a similar rule that says if you get hate speech, you can have your phone revoked for the year and you can be punished. So I sent my school's dean, that's like their assistant principal, an email saying like, what the heck does that mean? And you may want to find this response interesting. He wrote back, I quote, I do understand that the term hate speech without a specific definition accompanying it could be misunderstood or misinterpreted. But I want to make clear how we would interpret it. He doesn't say. For what it's worth, our principal reached out to the LCPS administration to ask for clarity on this term, end quote. In other words, they have no idea what these terms mean. And yet they are trying to basically chill the speech of students in there to basically, if you go against their woke Marxist agenda, they're going to try to threaten you with discipline. I mean, these are just lawsuits waiting to happen. And unfortunately, they know it's unconstitutional, but they do it anyway. I mean, that's typically the sign of an autocrat, right?
Yeah. Oh, there's one more resource that to pull up. We talked about the FBI, but there's also donotnametham.org, which goes into the profile, the contagion, like with active shooter, because it actually is a social contagion. They're indicators of someone who actually may be developing into one, and it's called donotnametham.org. It's an organization that calls for media to have responsible reporting, to not focus on the perpetrator, but the victims and the heroes that react in such circumstances. For example, in Sandy Hook, there was a small child that recognized how many rounds were in a weapon when they were reloading. He grabbed two of his friends and they ran to safety, as well as a professor at Virginia Tech that helped barricade the door and allowed 27 students to escape. But Sam, do you have that one up before we go in there? Maybe we can give the site some recognition. If
well,
not,
actually, I do have it, and I'll pull it up here in a second. But for some strange reason, my mouse just completely disappeared.
Oh, that happens.
So I can't pull anything up right now, and I can't do anything at the moment. So
all right, well, we can
let
talk.
me try to fix this. You guys go ahead.
One thing in light of the COVID pandemic that I think we want to be responsible about, right, is teaching our kids, and in particular our kids, but everybody, to be rational. We saw incredibly irrational paranoia among the teachers and admins and shut everything down for a benign virus, particularly to kids. And we need to be careful with gun safety. The number of kids killed per year over the last 20 years averages about 6 per year. That's less than the number of kids who get killed by lightning or any other number of extremely rare events. The fact that the media pushes this stuff, and that most of the people in education are simply too mathematically illiterate to understand how infrequent this is, particularly to kids. Teach kids how to do it, but the constant focus on, hey, somebody's going to come and get and shoot up your school is just crazy. There may be a few of these, and we focus on every one, but if we focus on every kid that got hurt in a bike accident or lightning, people would be terrified of riding their bike. So I do feel we need to train people. Let's be careful in how we try to scare kids and try to scare parents. Because
you're not trying to
self-defense, right?
Well, you're not trying to scare kids, but if there's, my point is that they're providing inaccurate guidance. I would, you mentioned something today about how infrequent there are, and I saw something today about the data where, and maybe it's all right. So here's a statistic increase of active shooter incidents in the U.S. Maybe, and you did say specific to kids, where it shows the number of active shooter incidents that are increasing in the United States. I just sent that to you, Sam, if we can bring that up.
If you want to give a shout out back again to don'tnametham.org.
Yeah, definitely. Certainly to look at
Don't
Name Them.
Quick, and I'll pull up the other one. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's Don't Name Them. That's the website that goes and provides highlights of some of the characteristics of an active shooter, of a contagion. Most active shooters, which is interesting to know, is that they tend to be narcissists. They do things for notoriety and for attention. But when they do decide to act, to be careful, because these are people who are usually highly intelligent, and they lack compassion, and typically they don't show any mercy to their victims, and their sole goal is to inflict as much harm as possible, and to get as many targets as they possibly can within a short period of time. And what parents need to realize is that the average police response time is only 3 minutes. Now, Sam, Brian, not to dispute you, but if you scroll down that document there, I think it's on. It's not too far. It goes into the active shooter incidents, and there's a slide from 2017 to 2021. It's on page 6 on that page 3 of that document. Page 3. Yeah, that's the one.
I mean, even if there aren't a lot of deaths, it is still traumatic. And even and that's not, I don't know, that's not to say that lightning doesn't happen more, or, you know, but even somebody coming in with a gun is traumatic for children. And these, and I'm not saying that they shouldn't happen, but these trainings are traumatic too. I mean, these trainings start in kindergarten, like when the bad guy comes in with a gun. That's, I mean, as a parent, when I was first learning about these, I just find it mortifying that,
you know, you bring up a good point. From my understanding, Marshall had a really bad case, a bad incident with the lockdown, where they actually had a simulation where someone was walking through as an active shooter, which is recommended, which they don't have to do. FBI training, when they go through it, you don't have to. It's not traumatic. It's not to inflict post-traumatic stress on anybody. In fact, they go through a very calm process of how you should be reacting and some of the signs and what you should be doing to react. But I think you're right. With how Fairfax has done it in the past, they literally had someone try to role play as an active shooter and traumatize kids, which is asinine. All right. Have they started yet? But that's just one thing.
have they?
Yeah, I don't know. Hopefully, but maybe
The
they
meeting
should
will
be,
begin soon.
Maybe, but I said if we were in charge, we would probably be reaching out to professionals to help, you know, revise some of our training, our plans, making sure we're keeping kids safe, not traumatizing kids, particularly in a post-pandemic environment where mental health is a priority, where we need to be spending a lot of our focus. Maybe this is something we just look and update.
I'm kind of curious today if they're going to cover the anniversary of September 11th. I mean, they commemorate a lot of different things, and I'm wondering if they'll commemorate September 11th today. I do know that one of the board members voted against commemorating anything having to do with September 11th, and she actually referred back to her trauma that she was profiled with the police. I don't know. I was wondering, like, does the police profile people who run red lights and then don't hand over their license and registration? Is that the kind of profiling she was talking about? I'm not sure, but Ms. Somesh voted against. There was a resolution last year to honor in a moment of silence the victims and the heroes of 9/11, and current school board member Ms. Somesh voted against it just last year. So I'm wondering if they'll say anything even about September 11th today.
Well, hopefully they do. In fact, we actually have a clip of what was said, and certainly inappropriate. I mean, this is also the same school board member that made some anti-Semitic remarks as well.
Yes.
So that was definitely not.
She had a tweet that was anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
And then actually, Harry, I was made to seem like I had a problem with Ms. Somesh because she's Muslim by some reporter. I don't really know his name. I don't think it's important. But anyways, he basically said that I called her a jihadist, and then he's like, Ms. Somesh, a Muslim American. And I wasn't calling her a jihadist because she's a Muslim. I was calling her a jihadist because she was inciting jihad at a high school graduation. And she voted against having a moment of silence for September 11th victims and heroes. So I was really put off by this man's reporting. I just thought it was so ridiculous. Like, oh yeah, it's just crazy to me.
A little manipulative.
But that's what he was in. It was manipulative. It was completely for political reasons. So, but anyways, but yes, just to be clear, I have a problem with people who incite jihad and don't want to honor victims of the September 11th attacks in our country. So yes, I do have a problem with those people. I'm not sure what the standards are for the school board, but it seems like that should be a point of concern to people who are going to the polls. Or I'm not exactly sure, like at what point is there a code of ethics for these people where I don't know, if you're calling for jihad and not honoring victims of 9/11, I just kind of wonder, like, what are you doing representing anybody on the school board? And she's still there. Sometimes she stands for the pledge and sometimes she doesn't, but anyways, that's her First Amendment right.
That's her right to do that. But we can talk about there's a lot of things that could be concerning. I mean, you mentioned before, like, hey, when you're in your mid-20s and you're still living at home with your parents, and you put this person in charge of a $4 billion budget, interesting things might
And they're not
happen.
paying the property taxes or the 8% increase in property taxes this year. So not if your parents are footing the bill. So
Oh,
it's a good
wow.
gig if you can get it, I
So,
guess.
so yeah, so that's a really good gig. I mean, do you get free food too? I mean, like, we all
That's a
had to
good
crash at a
question.
parent's house. You raid the fridge, you know. Is that the other thing? So like we have the commentary. Sam, you got the two that might be coming up. Oh, they're gonna be closed certification, closed meeting minutes. This is where they're verifying, how often they've been sued. I mean, the legal bill is over $16 million in legal fees because they just keep getting sued for infringing on our rights, be it free speech, racist policies against Asians,
Going against state law
abusing
regarding
special needs.
masking.
Right, masking, exactly. Discriminating against parents for viewpoint discrimination, locking special need kids in the closets. They have to have a lot of special meetings. They continually find themselves in legal turmoil. So, all right, so we got there. Both are in there. We talked about what we were just referring to a little bit earlier. It's just amazing.
Okay, I have the Omesh clip here queued up.
Yeah.
There you go.
There should
that
be
tens
there should
of
be two.
thousands of FCPS students experience on a daily basis. The pain that trillions of dollars have gone into creating and perpetuating, and that continues in our very classrooms today. As patriots, we must confront our realities so that we can build better together. Indeed, love of country, of county, of community demands it. Last board meeting, we acknowledged the heartbreak of our children abroad in Afghanistan and our spirit to welcome the many refugees fleeing the aftermath. These pieces are all related. The harms stem from the same problem. The reality is that 9/11 has caused these layers of state-sponsored traumas. Resolution? It's not too late for this board to join the work needed to create an inclusive FCPS for all students where we can feel welcome, where all trauma and pain is acknowledged as legitimate and worthy of recognition. It's not too late to accept an alternative resolution the next time.
Ma'am, I'd ask you to please sit down and stay quiet, or we will have to take a break. Thank you. Ms. Corbett-Sanders, would you like to go ahead?
Wow, that's an understandable reaction to somebody. Brian, you served during that time. I served during that time. I lost classmates in the attack and people that I knew. And that's the response when you have over 2,900 people that died that day. You're muted.
Yeah, Brian, hold on a second, because I want to go to the board, guys. They're talking about Constitution Day, and then we can come back to Brian real quick. Here we go.
Okay.
Saturday, September 17th, and is the 235th anniversary of the nation's founding document. All schools in FCPS will observe this day on Friday, September 16th, or Monday, September 19th, with activities that recognize the adoption of the United States Constitution and those who have become citizens under the Constitution. Schools will use a variety of curriculum resources to teach students and build awareness about the importance of the Constitution and responsible citizenship.
Thank you, Ms. Togby. Agenda item 2.04, National Hispanic American Heritage Month recognition. The board will invite each recognition recipient to the dais for a photo after the reading of all recognitions. I call on Ms. Keys-Gamarra for the recognition.
Thank you. Each year, Americans observe National Hispanic Heritage Month by celebrating the histories, cultures, and contributions of Americans whose ancestors came from Spain, Mexico, the Caribbean, Central, and South America. This observation started in 1968 as Hispanic Heritage Week under President Lyndon Johnson. In 1988, President Ronald Reagan expanded the observation period to 30 days starting on September 15th and ending on October 15th. It was enacted into law August 17, 1988. National Hispanic Heritage Month is a wonderful opportunity for our schools and community to celebrate various cultures and traditions, and a tangible reinforcement of the school board's belief that our diversity is a strength that creates resilient, open, and innovative global citizens. In FCPS,
Wow.
1 in 4 of our students is of Hispanic heritage and boast
Brian,
ancestry
I'm
from
sorry,
a
Sam, you bring up
variety
that
of
map.
countries and cultures. These cultures in turn enrich our own school community. I encourage you to participate in the programs and events taking place during this time in our schools and community.
let's have
FCPS
a discussion of
values
how
its
much they
diversity
really-
and
they really-
acknowledges that all people contribute to the well-being of our community. FCPS is fortunate to have many groups whose members work with our Latino students, empowering them to be the next generation of leaders and professionals.
Thank you. Board members wishing to address this recognition may do so, and we will begin with Ms. Keys-Gamarra.
Thank you. I've actually been really looking forward to this because I had never had an opportunity to talk about my father-in-law. He was born in La Paz, Bolivia, and migrated to the United States, joined the Army, gained his citizenship, and attended UCLA to become a scientist. After that, he has received over 40 patents with various companies that he's worked with. And when you drive down the street, you might notice the telephone line and the little transmitter, I'm not sure exactly what it's called, but it stops the wire from dropping too low and causing problems. So I say that to say that I have a family that is joined with the Hispanic community, and I am just really excited that our family celebrates the heritage every single day. So I also wanted to point out that, and I'm going to take this
We can
off
talk about this.
because I can't talk.
So they claim
People
to
of
love
Hispanic
this.
heritage have long played important roles.
All right, so wow, they're really talking about how much they love the Hispanic community. Let's call this one out. Hey, do you have that map up that I sent to you?
Indeed, I do, sir.
All right, let's bring that up there. Can you scroll down to the bottom left quadrant and maybe zoom that in? Maybe let's zoom that in where you see where it's marked in red. You got to scroll all the way to the left. So for those of you that are watching, I'm actually going to bring up the middle school zone boundary map. You'll notice there are 2 schools down there, okay? You've got Sandburg Middle School, and you got little circles of red. Now, the other one is Vernon Woods Elementary School, Whitman Middle School, and up there, up north is Glasgow. Now, what I wanted to highlight is that if you look at Whitman, let's look at that's where the ones where most of those are Title I schools. They're majority black and Hispanic. Let's look at the Whitman School. Noticing everything down, if you can scroll down just a little bit further there. If you notice, there's a little highlight of that black there. The Whitman School is physically located outside of its boundary. So the school is not located where it's zoned. And if you want to bring that, if you want to talk about like Sandburg Middle School, which is a little bit farther to the south, like let's just bring this up. So I've got the great schools. Sam, that you can. I'm gonna bring up the one for Whitman, its general rating, and let's talk about like how that actually compares to Sandburg Middle School, which is mostly white and wealthier. And you notice that what they provided is basically de facto segregation. Wow, I'm glad that they decided to recognize to the Hispanic community a month of recognition, but the quality of education that they're providing to their children is subpar. They bust them in from outside. They don't even have a school that they have to get bussed in. There are no walkers to Whitman. And we see how well the school's doing. And then we can talk about the community school concept, which is supposed to address pandemic learning loss with all of the wraparound services to include tutoring. And Stephanie, I saw that you have the data there of just how our SOL scores, particularly in the achievement gap, have really tanked. But we'll give the Hispanic community a photo op. And a
month of recognition. Well, Harry, isn't this the case for Lewis High School and West Springfield High School too? Didn't they redraw the boundaries to take the wealthiest district out of Lewis High School and put it in West Springfield, like keeping they
did.
Keeping they
created another
mostly whites into West.
Yeah, mostly whites. They created. They created another pocket of poverty, Lewis High School. They redistricted all of the wealthy single-family households out of Lewis High School. And let me give you an impact for the audience to understand what impact that will have to the educational environment, the collaborative learning environment at that school. Let's talk about sports opportunities. FCP, Fairfax County Public Schools, the only things that they fund for sports are the officials, the facilities, and transportation to games. Everything else has to be raised by the booster community, which is the parent community. So when they take away all your middle and high income families that typically would contribute to those boosters, they are robbing those kids of those educational experiences. They are robbing those kids of the support of a parent-teacher association. And what they are creating is that they are creating inequities within our school system. So equity does exist. You know, we are anti-CRT, but there is systemic racism. And this is a great example of it, where they are segregating these kids. They're providing them inequitable resources. And when we talk about equity, we should be talking about equity to provide equal opportunities, not equal outcomes. And this school board.
This is like This seems like institutional racism created by the school board. Weren't they responsible for redistricting? Weren't they responsible for this redistricting? Yeah. You know, I drove past Lewis High School 2 days ago. I think it was 2 or 3 days ago, and they were the high school students were walking around they were doing a car wash, and they were walking around with buckets collecting money from the cars that were passing by for their athletic programs. So I know that they're suffering financially for those extracurricular programs for sure. You can see it firsthand. I mean, just driving past.
Yeah, the school board, we've heard them for the last 3 years talk about equity, and now we see the actions that they really take. They're all about inequity.
Yes, well, equity doesn't seem to me an equality. Equity doesn't seem to be about equality, right? I mean, they say explicitly things like, wasn't there a quote? One of them said that Asians were the problem or something. Like with regard to Thomas Jefferson admissions. Yeah, like
they did.
I don't know which one of them, but
it was all of them.
I don't understand, like, because they study too much, or I don't know what the problem.
Because they were excelling and achieving. They were achieving. So our chair, Ms. Eismore Heiser, was mentioning that before. Ms. Melanie Marin didn't even know that she had a large Asian constituent in her school district. So that was amazing. They were all vilified, the Asian community, and that was the driving impetus behind admissions changes to Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology. Hopefully that case will be resolved in court later this year. If not, it'll probably go to the Supreme Court. The federal judge has already deemed that it was racially motivated to begin with. Brian, you got any comments on that? Oh, sorry.
No, I mean, it's interesting when you get a judge to call both the school board and the principal to have he termed racial animus, which is basically hatred towards certain groups. In fact, the principal, Ann Bonatonomous, had basically said that it was unacceptable that so many Asians were there, and that solely based on the color of their skin, she wanted to replace some of the kids who were admitted to TJ with people with different skin color. I mean, you'd think we were back in the 1960s with the way they act, but Michelle Reed came out to Thomas Jefferson about a month ago and had questions for the community. And I asked her this and have it on a recording, and said, will she promise to provide the objective scores on AP tests and PSAT tests of the admitted classes, both before and after the admissions change? And she wouldn't commit to that. She told me that her staff would get back to me, but it's been a month and I haven't heard a single word. So
I wonder why.
Michelle Reed is about anything but transparency. So.
All right. Do we talk about? Go ahead.
No, I was going to talk about in terms of funding, in addition to districting the different schools so they have similar demographics among each school. Fairfax is not really good about putting out the academic growth scores. In other words, not what they scored on an achievement test, how much they know, but how much they learn from where they started each year. In Michelle Reed's old state, they had things called student growth percentiles, which measured exactly that. And districts were forced to put that on their public scorecard for everybody to see. You could see how much Black students gained, how much white students gained, Asians, special ed, Hispanics, right? But I haven't seen that data for Fairfax. I know when Virginia created SGPs, Fairfax came out and publicly said they would not even use them. So most education reformers cite student growth percentiles and value-added metrics as the single most informative metric to see how they're taking care of their poor kids. But Fairfax seems to want to hide that data. So I wouldn't have a lot of
I gotta laugh at the background right now with the board. I mean, this, a board member whose highest level of education is just high school, sitting behind with a backdrop of books. I got to find that kind of comical a little bit. I don't think he's read them.
Community organizations strengthen schools and the business community alike by providing a well-trained, healthy, and highly educated.
Mr. Frisch, I'm going to have to pause you. Are we okay?
Was it because we put back to the board? Did you notice that?
Whereas collaboration between local public schools and local businesses and the community organizations strengthens schools and the business community alike by providing a well-trained, healthy, and highly educated workforce. And whereas an excellent public school system is vital to the quality of life in Fairfax County and fundamental to preserving a strong and democratic society now and in the future. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Fairfax County School Board names Capital One, Inova Health Systems, and Western Fairfax Christian Ministries to the 2022 Virginia School Board Association Business Honor Roll, showing appreciation for each entity's ongoing support of Fairfax County Public Schools. Your work has aided this community in focusing on the goal of providing the best public schools we can for every child who attends them. I so move.
I meet so many teachers, they have to have side hustles. And I would say did you know they only get paid 11 months out of the year?
No, I didn't know that.
And if they want to get paid 12 months, well, they can get paid 12 months out of the year, but they have to go through Apple Mountain Credit Union. So I propose as a board, and if I can get a second, that we, pay teachers what they're worth. We address like the pay discrepancies and pay transparency issues, particularly when they hire so many admins. And we pay them 12 months out of the year, and they can use the financial institution of their choice.
Yeah, I would second that. I would also like to do just a complete audit of the budget. There's so much waste administratively. And I think like teachers, and Brian knows a lot about this, and I think that teachers aren't getting enough because I know a lot of my teacher friends are going, they're leaving as soon as they possibly can. They do their 30 years, and instead of sticking around and they still want to teach, they'll actually take off and go to like the Manassas district or go to Loudoun and collect their retirement and then go to a different school district. And what I've just heard from somebody who ended up going to Manassas is that the working conditions there are much, much, much better. She's much happier there. So I think there's a lot going on. So there was 900 teachers, like there was a mass exodus after the 2021-2022 year from Fairfax County in particular. And I'm willing to bet, I don't have the figures in front of me, but it wasn't that substantial in surrounding areas. And we still have 205 teacher vacancies. So whatever is going on with teachers, they're not happy here.
I've heard one thing, they're not being paid. Of course, we want to pay for them. So what we would, also I've heard one reason why they're leaving is that they're not empowered to manage their classrooms and instill discipline. So I would certainly be for empowering teachers that if a student throws their desk at them, that something more significant than just simply an hour of in-school suspension, which I think is inappropriate. And also let's provide them upward opportunities. I think it's my understanding that they're limited, that they have, if there's a principal vacancy at a school, that they actually have to apply to a pool that will screen out those candidates before they go on to a selection committee that would rather invite which ones they would rather invite for an interview. I say if there's an open vacancy, any teacher can apply for it, and that we use an HR department to look for the key terms and select the candidates so we get the best principals at our schools. So I think we can't be pro-parent and pro-teacher.
I think that's right.
I mean, if you look at the districts that have actually been innovative on pay, I mean, no business pays everybody the same based solely on the number of years that they've worked there, nor pays their star contributors who have fewer years of experience less than their kind of retired in place, older workers. You get paid on the job you perform and how well you perform the job. And if you look at Dallas, Texas, Douglas County, Colorado, and DC, they actually distribute teachers equally. So let's say you have a star performer, they distribute those teachers around so they're spread out among all the schools. And so all the kids have an equal shot at getting a great teacher. And in Dallas, Texas, they redesigned the system. So if you're a star teacher, within 7 or 8 years, you can go from entry level all the way to the top of the pay scale. Now that obviously means you're getting great results. You're taking on responsibilities for mentoring and doing leadership opportunities. But you have, some teachers who perform much better than teachers who've been there 30 years, yet the former get half the pay than the teachers who are 30-year veterans, even though they're performing better. And what you see is, classic union monopoly control in these government schools, right? That it's based on, solely the number of years in service, and it's designed to, protect the weak teachers so that they never get removed. And the administrators benefit because the public doesn't get to see the results. And if the administrators and the board were so confident that every teacher was just as effective, maybe they could let parents choose which teacher they have, and the board and the administrators put their kids in the teachers who get the fewest votes.
Well, one question I have is the union in Fairfax actually advocating for their constituents? I mean, we have a mass exit of teachers due to working conditions. That's the purpose of a union, to represent them. I mean, it's unfortunate that that we become approached from teachers that are telling us what's going on, why they're leaving, through polls and surveys, and asking, looking to us to give as a sign of hope, like, can you please do something about this? And we will certainly make that attempt to do that. But hope is on the way. We definitely want the teachers to stick around. You're the ones that interact with our children.
We want good teachers to stick around. Right. We don't want ineffective teachers to stick around, and there's a considerable number of those.
Well, right. Okay, but let's just we're dealing with systemic issues, right? When you see a mass exodus of people leaving, I mean, from an organizational standpoint, if you imagine organization leadership, that's an indicator of one insider threat. Because it shows also you're having a toxic management style. So that's something I think we need to address. That is a symptom of a toxic management and a toxic culture. I think we need to go in there. We need to address that.
We're taking a moment.
We should do a climate survey with the teacher, an honest climate survey.
And want to echo Ms. Paparsky that we know we're blessed with a lot of tremendous entities and corporations and organizations, and we always welcome that partnership.
Thank you. Ms. Keys-Gamarra, did you want to speak? Thank you. No worries. Seeing no other board members who wish to speak, I just will say very briefly that I truly believe it takes a village to educate our students, and it takes a village to support our public schools. And we are so lucky here in Fairfax County with this village that we have of parents and community members and community organizations and corporations who have really stepped up to help, especially in these last 2 years, stepped up to help partner with us on health. And I mean, weekly, I think we had a working group with Inova as part of it to really help keep our students in school safe, keep our staff safe. We, with Capital One, providing technology, with Western Fairfax Christian Ministries, and many others providing food. They literally have scooped our students and staff up and help us educate them, feed them.
I just want to apologize for the quality of the audio. The feed's really noisy. I'm trying to clean it up a little bit, but it's audible. But that's on their end.
Our village. So thank you very much. And with that, I will call for the vote. All those in favor, please raise your hands. It's Ms. Keys-Gamarra, Ms. Omesh, Ms. Tolan, Ms. Darnett Koufax.
All controversial stuff will happen later on this evening.
Ms. Pekarsky.
Yes.
And myself, all those opposed, I see none. Oh, sorry, and Ms. Cohen and Mr. Frisch. And that is with Ms. Merritt and Dr. Anderson away from the table, and Ms. Corbett-Sanders absent, so that motion passes. Thank you very much.
They're talking about business support for public education. I think most people support public education and public funding. What they don't support is the government monopoly of schools. And just like we do in higher education, where you can get public funding for scholarships or Pell Grants or other things to do a school of your choice. I think, everybody here on the shadow board, and I guarantee every single one of those businesses would believe that the clients, namely the students and families, should have choice, just like the businesses' clients have choice.
Absolutely.
Yes.
We should be expanding classroom beyond the wall opportunities, especially considering we're Silicon Valley, the East for computer and technical education. We should be providing, trade skills opportunities for students as well, because not every student is interested in the classic liberal education. They want to learn. They might want to become an electrician. They might want to become a plumber. Considering especially how expensive college tuition is, it may not be a return. You may not get a return on investment getting an undergrad in 17th century poetry.
Harry, in one of the surveys that they had the middle schoolers fill out, I don't know if it was specific to one middle school, but one of the surveys asked the question, which people in your family have attended college? And I was told by the principal, that this was an optional survey, but that's a detail that they left out to the students. They didn't tell them that this was an optional survey. So anyways, I ended up getting the questions for it. But one of the questions was, which people in your family have attended college? And I was like, this seems really intrusive. I mean, there are a lot of very intrusive survey questions, but also, why would you need to know which family members attended college? And I was told it was because there was some additional assistance to students who didn't have a family member who had attended college. But then first of all, there are two problems with that. If that were the case, they could have just said, has anybody in your family attended college, not targeting which specific people in your family attended college. And the second problem with that is, do we have a problem with the trades? I mean, are we like trying to create this hierarchy where, I kind of just feel like with most of the survey questions, just how about you guys mind your own business and get back to the whole education thing?
I would agree with you. Education, especially with rising tuition costs, you're not getting the return. Going to higher education is an investment in yourself, and especially with undergrad, that you may not be getting a return on investment, particularly in Northern Virginia, where just about everybody's got a master's degree. So it's not. Is it really going to be worth going into $120,000 in debt just for undergrad? Because that's going to delay your opportunities to go into grad school. So I am completely with you on that one. And we have Nova is actually a great and affordable option. On your point of these SEL surveys, let's talk about that for a second. That is being used to mine data of your children. If you want to, Sam, if you want to bring up that map again, let's talk about these SEL surveys. Parents, they need to know that when your child is filling out these surveys that they can't take home, that they don't want you to see what questions they're asking your children. These surveys, the data that they're collecting is in many cases going to Panorama Education. And if you even look at their website, like I said, with my background, I work in cyber, I'm an IT consultant, I teach, in academia in this area. They even acknowledge that they're pretty minimal security, and they even put out there to have the expectation that there might be a data breach, there might be a privacy breach. That's not acceptable. A lot of cloud service providers consider a security breach at an extinction level event for them if they're put out of business. In this case, they're not doing it. And what's so dangerous about these SEL surveys is that it's not what's being provided. It's also providing data points where they can infer what your students' preferences are, where they're going, how they're developing, and that can be used and be sold to marketing. And you don't know if Panorama has been compromised. You don't know we don't know if they have a log retention policy. We know that FCPS does not have a log retention policy. We know that FCPS does not have a data at rest policy. We know they do not have a data in transit policy. And what's really unfortunate is that I mentioned before the Whitman Middle School, Glasgow Middle School, Vernon Woods Elementary School, where they have these community schools. That's where they're bringing in third-party providers, and they're actually going through and mining that SEL data themselves. So, Stephanie, when you get the SEL, your opt-out forms, is it via email? Are you getting hard copies of being able to opt out?
Well, in the past, I think I did get a hard copy, but this year it seemed a lot more surreptitious. I was really surprised by this. My sons came home, didn't bring anything, but it ended up all being on email, and then at like the very bottom for elementary school, at the very bottom, it's like, oh, and by the way, P.S., here's this tiny opt-out form. You can print it yourself. It wasn't even like a standard form. And then for my middle schooler, I had to email the counselor to opt him out. Because I'm like, also mind your own business. These are very intrusive questions that they shouldn't. I don't want people knowing this about my children, like they, especially when there are such data breaches. But also, it's none of their business. But I do think they're making it harder to opt out. And also, one more thing on that: the digital. You can sign your digital signature on the parent, whatever it's called, the parent view, whatever FCPS parent view. And what they did was, so I said before, I refused to sign the student rights and responsibilities document just because of the egregious violation of constitutional rights in that document. It's a violation. First, like, compelled speech is a violation of your First Amendment rights. So they wanted me to sign, all parents to sign the student rights and responsibilities. I refused on Parent View, so now they won't allow me to sign anything with my digital signature on Parent View until I sign the oh, look at this. It's up there right now. So they won't allow me to sign any kind of digital documents until I go ahead and sign that I've received the student rights and responsibilities document and read it, or whatever that is. So I submitted the emails to the counselors and the principals and the teachers, and I said, in case it's unclear, we're opting out of this because this is hashtag none of your business. Like, all of these questions you're trying to screen from our children, it's none of your business.
And not only that, but say if you're one of these families that go to Whitman, Sandburg, Lewis, Justice High School, the ones that were the Title I school, so to speak, most of those families don't have laptops. A lot of those families don't have laptops. They can't afford them.
Right.
They have a smartphone. So in this case, it's like they're not being able to give informed consent, which we certainly would advocate for. We should have opt-in, not opt-out, and informed consent. And what even Panorama, they try to say, to try to make it as difficult as possible because they want to get the maximum participation. But essentially what they're doing is that we talk about inequities. They're basically making it harder for these families to even be aware, to become aware what they want them to be left in the dark with their children being asked. And then they're making it extremely inconvenient, difficult for them to opt out. And so their kids are just being used as data mining, and they're doing just even social experiments. Like those community schools, that's where Darren Thornton was employed at Glasgow Middle School during his entire existence. This was a man who was a sex offender who solicited prostitution from a minor, was arrested. They didn't identify him, and it wasn't until he was arrested a second time years later, after he was even convicted. He should have showed up on the sexual predator list, and that the sex offender list, kind of and yet that wasn't screened. And that's another issue. FCPS doesn't subscribe to the alerts whenever a sexual predator is moved into an area that's near their schools. That is something that is inexcusable. They relied solely on email. If they get notified from a police force, they need to be more proactive. That is not. And didn't they say,
wasn't the excuse like, oh, we didn't get that email? Didn't they say that?
Yeah, the excuse was that you didn't get their email. And even if you don't get the email, you should still be monitoring. What happens if you have when your staff members gets arrested. How does that is inexcusable. There should be an alert system. There should be like if Brian, you're in the military, like a situation report that goes out to certain people. It doesn't have to be a single point of failure, or in this case, a cylinder of excellence, which was Scott Brabrand at the time, because you really are relying, how well does a superintendent manage their email inbox? Because that's the only thing protecting your kid from a predator working in your schools. And by the way, community schools are 24/7 after school support.
Guys, we are about to launch into public comment, it looks like. I'd like to go ahead.
Let's bring up one of the speakers. Was the one that let's talk about that one. You see the Kate Carey. I think she is speaking this evening. Let's bring up this person. Brian, do you want to give us the play-by-play of what we saw? This is at the Thomas Jefferson Parent-Teacher Conference meeting last year. We have our one speaker, Ms. Kate Carey. Let's give us some background information. Can you give us some background information on what happened during that meeting? Sam, do you have that video?
I do.
All right, let's bring that up.
Okay, Carrie.
It is the FCPS school board who makes the decision about TJ admissions and FCPS leadership. I do not make, nor have I had any role in the decision making for TJ admissions. Not make, nor have I had any role in the decision making for TJ admissions.
I'd like to just center the board in the next slide, if we can, of what FCPS student population looks like. 37% white, a little bit over 19% Asian, almost 10% African American, and you can see, again, 2 or more races, and our Hispanic population being almost 27%. Mr. Smith.
TJ, and as Dr. Brabrand said earlier, the diversity at TJ doesn't currently reflect the diversity of Northern Virginia, and the talent at TJ does not reflect the talent in Fairfax County Public Schools.
I have letters from classes of graduates with hundreds of signatures saying that diversity needs to be addressed. People are hurting. We've heard from a student who I've spoken many times with now, who tried to bleach her skin because she didn't.
Okay, guys, I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna go back to the board meeting because they are live now.
Oh yeah, well we got to have Kate Carey. She's the one that assaulted and tried to climb up my side. I mean, that was the best one. All right, let's listen to this one. I mean, come on, she's up next. She's talking next.
It is great that humans want to help the troubled, but at what point is it acceptable to put mainstream students at risk because of one potentially dangerous individual? Almost all mass shooters have dropped hints at one point or another, like Ethan Crumbly, Salvador Ramos, and Nicholas Cruz, writing things on social media like I'm going to become a professional school shooter. Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. See you tomorrow, Oxford, and posting videos of firearms.
Thank you very much.
That's very morbid. Do we have the woke wobble? Can we bring the woke wobble audible for our next speaker?
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kate Carey.
I hope she doesn't climb anyone today.
I hope she doesn't climb anyone. We got the video.
I have 2 high school students enrolled in Fairfax Public Schools. They brought me their concerns about your science curriculum. You'll be receiving handouts with a map of the United States that shows that Virginia's grade for teaching the science of climate change is an F. This is more remarkable when you consider that coal-producing West Virginia has a D. In fact, oil-producing states like Oklahoma and Alaska have a B- and A- respectively. Virginia really is an outlier. My kids showed me this map, and I said, well, we live in Fairfax. I'm sure we have an A. That's when my high school senior stunned me. He said the only time he's ever discussed anything related to climate change was in his 8th grade science class studying energy. Using FCPS created worksheets, the students learned that we will eventually run out of fossil fuel and coal, but there were problems with green energies. The sheet then went into detail about those problems, sidestepping the problems with carbon-emitting fuels. I propose a working group to be created to improve our county's grade on this topic. How exactly is FCPS teaching climate change across subject matters and in what grades? Schools cannot hide from difficult problems. The kids know this is happening. They need to be mentally prepared for a hotter world. They need to be educated to make wise financial decisions. Basics like, what kind of drainage system do you have on your property? What kind of renter's insurance do you have? Most importantly, they need guidance about the future job market, and that guidance must address significant changes that are happening now and accelerating. Climate solutions are where tomorrow's jobs will be. We need new strategies in agriculture, people entering environmental science, and scientists capable of developing carbon mitigation technology. I quote your own mission statement to you. FCPS prepares all students for the world of the future and employment beyond high school. Let's really do that. I have copies of the books that I used, Virginia Climate Fever by Stephen Nash and Miseducation, which I'm happy to share with you at a later time. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Martha Bretschneider.
Racial rage.
If they were actually
teaching
on climate change, they would teach that for most of the last billion years. There's been no ice at either pole.
I'm here as a Fairfax County resident of close to 30 years to urge the school board to commit publicly to anti-racist education and declare its support for the teachers who do the work. 2 years ago, I had considered myself to be a well-educated mother of 2, now young adults, who came up through Fairfax County Public Schools. George Floyd's murder in May 2020 and the national reckoning it sparked inspired my own self-reflection and personal journey. The first phase of this process involved intense discomfort. Rather than try to bury that discomfort, I forced myself to sit with it. I started reading about the parts of our history I hadn't learned in school. I discovered how clueless I had been about the experience of Black Americans and other people of color in our country, let alone the socioeconomic impacts of systemic and institutional racism that persists today. I felt angry and betrayed by the school system in which I was raised and by the adults who whitewashed our history. I felt I had been lied to with so many gaps in my education. Our children deserve better. Professional educators know this and deserve our publicly stated support for their efforts. Yes, anti-racist education can be uncomfortable, but learning to sit with the discomfort of our history and respond thoughtfully to the truth with empathy and compassion prepares our children to be future leaders and problem solvers. Public statements in support of anti-racist education can be uncomfortable in the current political environment.
That take over NAACP
this moment in history
and divert funds away from the Black community.
And risk-taking.
Just point that out.
Our children, our community,
our
and our country's future depend on it.
And they divert funds away from the Black community.
I urge the board to approve the Teach Truth resolution coming up and publicly put Fairfax County.
All right, woke wobble.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Julie Perry.
Hello, thank you so much for letting me speak here tonight. Actually, I am a teacher for this county, but I'm not a teacher that probably shares the same views as you guys, and you guys probably know that. I'm just here to speak tonight about Policy 2603. I love all of my students regardless of their gender, race, ethnicity, or political affiliation. And I mean everybody. I have concerns about the fact that I have girls afraid to go to the bathroom. I've had to let some into the one stall. And, you know, it's heartbreaking because I have relationships with these kids. And I want to keep my kids safe. You know, as a teacher in the classroom, these kids become your kids, whether you know it or not. And also, it's hard for me to call a kid something they're not because it violates my Christian principles. You know what? Most students that struggle with what's going on usually overcome it. I have a specific learning disability. I was a child in elementary and secondary schools that had an IEP. I had to overcome my challenge in life, and I did it. And I did it because I had teachers and my parents encouraged me to do their best. And that's why I got into this field, is because I want to encourage my students the way my teachers encouraged me. And so I really think it's important that we help these kids and love them the best we can and strive them to be the best we can. Thank you so much for letting me speak.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Tom Goudreau.
That highlights a problem. We shouldn't have to have teachers escorting our girls to the bathroom because they're afraid to go. And we need to keep teachers like Julie Perry, more teachers like her in our classroom, and be inspirations to our children.
Good evening.
That's right.
FCPS needs a new strategic plan. I recommend prioritizing the following strategic concerns. Number one, return FCPS academic performance to levels achieved prior to the 2019-2020 school year.
Yes.
FCPS online learning harmed many students and significantly reduced student success. Recovery and compensatory services need to be a strategic focus. 2, repair damaged relationships with parents. Declaring war on parental consent, hiring lawyers to fight parents of special education students, and failing to sustain academic excellence has directly contributed to thousands of students disenrolling from FCPS. Implementing policies that destroy the parent-teacher relationship has significantly reduced FCPS workforce satisfaction. Number 3, reestablish resource stewardship to serve FCPS strategic priorities. FCPS needs to end spending on discretionary projects until such time that all classroom requirements have been funded. Lastly, FCPS's commitment to, quote, reach, challenge, and prepare every student for success in school and life should not just be about eliminating gaps. FCPS achieved national recognition in large measure because we resourced a gifted and talented program that maximized students' potential while also meeting our commitments to special and general education. Rationing educational opportunity does not create a caring culture. Achieving equity by limiting other students' potential is a race to the bottom. Dr. Reed, if the FCPS strategy is simply to be an average public school system, your new strategy should plainly say that. If the FCPS strategy is going to be ignored by decision makers, as it has been the past 3 years, FCPS should simply not publish a strategy. Teachers, students, parents, and taxpayers deserve a public school system far better.
You know,
Thank you. Our next speaker is Killian Kelly.
I want to make a comment on what Mr. Goudreau had mentioned. He had mentioned that FCPS uses what's called a board reserve fund, and what that is that's a discretionary spending account that they use when they line out certain items. There's a board flexibility reserve, in which allows for discretionary funding. They cut certain things from their budget
because of his education, AP test scores. He has the ability
on other programs, such as a lot of these social justice initiatives that they have that are not focused on academic excellence. I'm sorry, let's go back.
I want to fix this for all the current students, families, and boys following after them. The Woodson baseball field is atrocious. Don't believe me? Google it. Worst baseball fields in America. You can watch the YouTube video. The best place to watch a game is usually behind home plate, but not at Woodson. You can't see the first base or right field. The handicap spot, you can't see left field. The press box, you can't see the batter or the umpire. Our volunteers watch Game Changer to follow the pitch count to run the scoreboard. The press box leaks, it floods. There are wires. The response has been, we'll keep an eye on it. FCPS built a road behind the dugout that is handicapped accessible. They didn't check that it is higher than the dugouts, so when it rains, the water has nowhere to go. Our boys spend over an hour cleaning up the flooding mess while other teams warm up for games. Where is equity? Where is equality? After a full day of classes, students shouldn't have to worry about the status and condition of their field. We have been told that the school or boosters has to pay for these changes, but these are FCPS issues. According to 3860.8, the board is responsible for press boxes, dugouts, and fields. While other schools have had updates, Woodson has not. What are the timelines and schedules for FCPS to keep fields looking the same? There is no other FCPS high school field that looks as bad as Woodson's. What is the procedures for schools to get things repaired when facilities makes a mistake and won't repair it? Pride in your high school's home field and pride in your community should be something all FCPS.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Sandra Davis.
Highlighting yet another failure in equity.
I like your pearls. I wore mine too in case I needed something to clutch. You all expect to adopt a resolution regarding collective bargaining in the coming months. Let's be transparent. There is no daylight between the 12 of you and the ones wanting this resolution passed. You all are politically endorsed by them, and your re-elections are dependent on them. In your eagerness to capture the viewpoints of these associations, you have neglected the viewpoints of the teachers who do not wish to become members and the community at large who are all set with the administrative bloat that is driving up our property taxes. How much more money will need to be spent on lawyers and other union-related staff? You might not have heard from up there, but teacher unions aren't very popular right now. Parents and grandparents remember they obstructed the return to school plan by inserting themselves into the policy at the national and the local level. We remember the delays, orchestrated sick out, science ignored, and unreasonable demands that schools should not be reopened until 14 days of zero community COVID spread, a benchmark that has yet to be met. Thank goodness parents created their own associations and intervened. The party line is that teachers leave FCPS because of pay, but they tell me that they are leaving because of the things they are being forced to teach and secrets they are being asked to keep from parents. They are overwhelmed by all the extra administrative staff in the form of instructional coaches, layers of support staff, new training, scripts they must read, and resources that are politically charged. Meetings before school, after school, during lunch, and issues with student discipline compounded by union-led extended closures. One can hope that teachers feel free to approach the school board with these concerns before quitting FCPS, but I'm skeptical. Not retaining teachers equals more learning loss, an issue rarely discussed here.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Shay Cousin.
Hi, everyone. I'm calling in virtually. I'll make it very short because my kids are about to leave their music class. After the COVID epidemic, there has been a drastic increase in mental health problems amongst school-aged children. And I know that it's difficult for parents whose kids are in a mental health crisis to find the resources within Fairfax County on how to educate their children. Because a lot of these children that are having the mental health crisis aren't able to go to school. And so it would be really nice if it was easier to find, to get help and to educate our children that can actually go to school because they're suffering from a mental health crisis. So I'd like to see more resources available to parents, like something on the homepage or somewhere that we can look and find what to do next for our children. And I think you guys are doing a great job, and I'm a very happy parent and love our schools. That's it.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Joanne Sears.
You know, with regard to what Sandra was saying, I found teachers' unions gave $1.3 million to Democrats and $2,500 to Republicans in 2022, for 2022.
Wow.
And in Virginia,
Good evening.
specifically, they contributed
The recently released results of the
$600,000
National Assessment of
to
Educational Progress showed historic drops
They're
in
very
math
one-sided.
and reading scores in U.S. public schools. Former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg said in the Washington Post just yesterday, the findings are indicative of school closures that went on for far too long, pushed by teacher unions and some of their political allies. Those political allies are sitting on the board in front of me now. What this board has created is nothing short of a national emergency. Some communities are doing okay. This is because wealthier families have been able to buy their way out of the failure of school systems like FCPS, who shuttered schools for 17 months. But if you dig deeper, you will see scores for Latino and Black children are abysmal, and test scores for children from poor communities are in the single digits. Children are not learning even the baseline to graduate from elementary school, much less high school. The next coming storm? Just ask a preschool teacher with little ones who have been forced to don masks for almost their entire lifetime. Numerous scientific papers have established that it can be harder to hear, understand speech, and identify facial expressions and emotions. These are critical developmental tasks, particular for children in the first 3 years of life. The kids are now entering FCPS, and it is yet another all-hands-on-deck moment. While some of you have chosen to use the backs of our children as stepping stones to further your own political careers and run for higher office, families are left standing in the bitter ashes of yet another school year where their children continue to fall behind. Where is your strategic plan? What are you doing to recruit, retain special education teachers, speech and language therapists, and reading coaches? If you don't have a plan today, you will continue to fail our most vulnerable students tomorrow.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Deb Tisler.
Very good.
Let me point out that Fairfax schools are giving away the service that costs over $20,000 for free, and they have lost customers. They have lost customers that refuse to come back, even though they're giving it away for free.
I am here tonight to talk about toxic school system syndrome. It is rampant in FCPS. Teachers are scared of the harmful effects upon them and their students. Poor policies and indifference to the actual needs of the students, teachers, and families of the FCPS community created one of the fastest growing toxic learning and working environments, such as teachers feeling uncomfortable raising issues and concerns important to them, and teachers left without the necessary tools to teach their students the fundamental skills they need to succeed. This lack of support is one of the greatest predictors of teachers leaving their profession. In a few weeks, we will embark upon another anniversary of this school board's National Dyslexia Awareness Month resolution that I predict will have another dog and pony show filled with bloviated, self-serving scripted statements intended to springboard the speaker off the backs of children drowning in a sea of illiteracy. This school board is aware that FCPS has the funding to ensure a literacy program that is at capacity to succeed in meeting the needs of long-neglected students. The majority of the teachers hired by FCPS do not know the foundational skills of the science of reading. The secondary schools do not have the resources they need to identify and remediate students. This school board holds the key to $188.8 million of ESSER funds that they have withheld from crucial areas. Instead, this school board allows convicted sex offenders to have access to our children because they are unable to ensure proper background checks. Let's also not forget this school board's attempt to silence a 12-year-old sexually assaulted in FCPS schools and firing an auditor out of retaliation. Clearly, this school board has no issue paying millions to Hunton, Andrews, and Kurth and Blanking, Ship, and Keith to act as their agents of terror. When will this school board realize this toxic school system syndrome rooted in their decisions is harmful? Has this school board even considered they might be the reason why FCPS is under investigation by OCR for a multitude of civil rights violations? Perhaps this school board should take a moment to reflect on that.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Thomas Cranmer.
Well done. Well said.
Thomas Cranmer. Our next speaker is Jeffrey Shapiro. Our next speaker is Mark Spooner.
Oh, wow. Hey, Mark.
Good evening. At one of the July board meetings, the president of the Fairfax Teachers Association said that the union looked forward to collective bargaining with this board in the coming year. Then at the meeting of this board 2 weeks ago, it came out that the school year's budget already includes funds to support collective bargaining. My questions are, what's going on and why? A Virginia law that was enacted in 2020 allows collective bargaining between a school board and a union if, but only if, the board has passed a resolution to allow such bargaining. As far as I've been able to determine, you haven't passed such a resolution, and you have no legal obligation to. And why would you? This union already has tremendous power. During COVID, it inflicted significant damage on students and on parents. It only cared about its own interests, not about the children who lost a year of learning, and not about the parents who lost their jobs to stay home with their kids. Parents, I think, would be very surprised to learn about steps to reward this union with more power than it already has. So if you go forward, the process needs to be inclusive and transparent. So I call on you to do 4 things. Number 1, fully disclose what's being considered and why. Number 2, disclose the meetings and correspondence that have already occurred with the union concerning collective bargaining. Number 3, tell the public where things stand. And number 4, set up a series of public hearings to allow citizens to be heard. This is a very consequential matter that can't be presented as a fait accompli after you've worked for months with the union behind the scenes. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Stephen McCullough.
Yeah, this is the one we got to talk about. after this one. We got two speakers we got to address on this one. Yeah. This guy's getting paid $270,000 from community and schools.
Good evening. My name is Stephen McCullough. I am a parent of a recent graduate and a current 8th grade student. I am also here representing Free and Anti-Racist Minds, FAM, a local organization whose mission is to promote transformative public schools through anti-racist, community-based approaches. My work with FAM is also informed by my employment as Chief Operating Equity Officer of the National Office of Communities and Schools, which delivers wraparound services for students in over 3,000 Title I schools across the country, including here in Fairfax County. I'm here in support and encourage this board to adopt the resolution entitled Teach Truth. This resolution acknowledges the work that FCPS has already done to promote equity in its educational policies and practices. The resolution also recognizes the moment, this moment that educators are in regarding forces that are intent to undermine and weaken their ability to teach our collective history effectively, specifically around race, cultural difference, and its impact on our society. This has created fear among educators to temper their voice and ability to instruct effectively. As a consequence, students lose knowledge, perspective, and critical thinking skills to eliminate the inequities in our society that all of us are committed to end. This resolution signals to everyone that this board commits to protect and support educators and school-based administrators in FCPS as they develop and implement anti-racist, equity, justice-based classroom resources and pedagogy that meet our collective values and ideals. Our individual and collective journeys on equity are far from over. I encourage and support this board beyond this resolution to approach this work with curiosity, inquiry, and not from a place of fear and backlash. We want our students to grow intellectually and ultimately.
So if we can bring it down.
Thank you.
So for
our next
everyone
speaker is Stacy Langton.
What? Yeah, I'll just go down. We don't need to cover this one. This is Mr. McCullough is the one he runs community and schools. They've got over $72 million in assets. They run the community and schools program at Glasgow Middle School. So this is the one where they provide wraparound support. Just keep it down. We don't need to hear this one. We can skip this one, Sam. We'll talk about this one. So we have the community and schools where they provide health screening. They're supposed to provide tutoring. They were supposed to actually mitigate the horrific learning loss that we were addressing. They were talking about before that. Joanne Spears, I mentioned, was in the single digits. They're getting paid by FCPS to provide these services to mostly Black and Hispanic students. We brought up that poverty pocket map. I kind of had that little Freudian slip, but they created a program which should be a project where they're continually getting money from our county, from our taxpayer dollars, to really perpetuate a problem. And now they want to just make it even worse with this, trying to teach anti-racist training. And I'll tell you how bad it is. I'm a sports official. I've seen an uptick in racial incidents, particularly with Black on white, Hispanic on white type of violence and incidents, because they're creating these cauldrons where they're telling these kids they're oppressed. And guess what? They are, by members of this school board. They're the ones that are creating these issues. And, and to have this one with McCullough, and we actually have the other thing with Kate Carey. Maybe we can get back to that. But do you guys have anything to add? I mean, we'll wait till the next speaker comes up. But, Brian, thoughts? Stephanie, thoughts?
Well, I mean, he was talking about, they call it anti-racism. What it is critical race theory, and it's the antithesis of critical thinking. So let's redefine what critical race theory is. Critical race theory is when you predetermine that any differences in the average group outcomes between democratic groups can only be caused by some type of ism, racism, sexism, whatever. You don't have to prove it. You just assume it and say it must be that. So now we're going to blame people. That is the opposite of the scientific method. It is the opposite of critical thinking. So everything they're trying to do is to dumb down the schools. If they had data to show that there was some active process to discriminate, they would show it, but they don't. And we're not even sure people are smart enough or educated enough to understand how you go about the scientific method. So I'll let them turn it back over to the speakers, but it just is a mockery when people get up there and basically put forth CRT, which is dumbing down our schools.
Dumbing down.
And also, we
preaching
should
hate and
definitely
racism.
we should put up those SOL scores just so we get a view. You know, I think in the last one, the 2022 ones weren't published, and there was a bit of a bump, but they sure did focus on it. They let the kids retake them. So all the, you know, things like CRT and the focus of supposed equity, which is like equity that yields actual inequality, especially at the expense of lower income students. The SOL scores, I think, are pretty important to reflect what's actually happening in the schools in terms of academic learning.
Yeah, it's unfortunate what they've done.
Yeah.
And, you know, they brought in CRT, they brought in, you know, radical transgender policy, they brought in porn and pedophilia in their schools. We have to elect moderates and people who are reasonable and are willing to put kids first. Hey, let's go back to the speakers. Let's see what we have. I think we have a few more. And let's go back at the end of it. Let's go back to the cake here. I already discussed the community schools and Mr. McCullough, how you just using
Fairfax
that to,
County, holding the over 28,000 IEPs that would be impacted by these proposed changes. I thank Dr. Reed and the school board for delaying this implementation, and I am horrified that DSS attempted to sidestep the ACSD and blindside parents on this important issue. The presentation of last year's annual report to the school board has been canceled 3 times now. Please hear the ACSD's annual report immediately. It will better prepare you for the concerns brought forward by the AIR special education audit in October. No changes to special education procedures should take place until after the AIR report has been considered. Thank you.
Our next video was submitted by Robert Rigby Jr.
Good evening. I am the Vice President for Advocacy of the Fairfax County Council PTA. As our Communications Vice President said last meeting, there are 170 active school PTAs and PTSAs in our county, each an independent 501c3 nonprofit. PTA's mission is to make every child's potential a reality by engaging and empowering families and
they're trying to
communities
take credit for
to advocate for
independent
organizations.
organizations.
We can only achieve our mission and vision in full collaboration and partnership with the broadest possible set of volunteers, staff, educators, schools, and communities. We ask this board to aid and protect staff and admin as they develop and implement classroom resources and pedagogy that are anti-racist, equity, and justice-based and liberatory. Inclusion is actions, behaviors, and social norms that ensure all people feel they are safe and that they belong. This means putting diversity into action with skill and intentionality to ensure everyone feels respected, supported, and valued.
All right, let's go
and
this
can
down.
fully
This
participate
is
with
the
equal
Fairfax
voice
County PTA.
and right to be
Brian,
heard.
you can add on this
This
one.
means actively
Isn't this the same entity? This is the same entity that wanted to run out a black president of a PTSA because of diversity. These are the people who talk about anti-racist training, but actually conspire with the Virginia PTA to vote out a black president of a PTSA because he wasn't willing to subscribe to their theories before he even took office. And yes, I'm referring to myself on that one, putting us on probation before we even took office.
It's a supposedly a parent organization who didn't stand up and defend parents who were speaking to school boards at all. It's a parent-teacher organization who didn't stand up and defend kids who were being locked out by this school board and teachers unions from their schools. That's not a parent-teacher organization. That's a teacher union Marxist organization. The PTAs extorts money from people to use for left-wing causes and has nothing to do with the interests of kids.
Yeah, when I hear them talk, I hear this. Tell me lies, tell me sweet little lies.
I mean,
Isn't there another one like the Meghan Trainor song? The your lips are moving, so you lie,
Hey
lie,
guys,
lie, lie.
let's not give YouTube any reason to give us a strike and pull the video down. So no, I mean I know that sounds like I might be exaggerating, but a little copyrighted clip, that could be the reason that they could use to take it.
Well, now you just given ammunition to a bunch of the really far left ones. They're gonna comb through this entire 3 hours to see how can we get this pulled down. I mean, they spend the time.
Let them come through and watch it, and maybe they'll learn something.
Let's talk about why the Virginia PTA and the National PTA hates choice. It's because when parents can choose which parent organization to represent them, they are overwhelmingly choosing non-affiliated parent-teacher organizations. If kids and families had the right to choose which schools to go to, they would not attend these government schools, just like the families don't want to join the left-wing PTA organizations, right? All of these groups that you hear tonight are opposed to choice. If they could get people to follow them, they wouldn't oppose choice, but that's what they do.
Well, you bring up a good point, and we talked about that poverty pocket map there. I mean, there's no reason while they're forcing all of the families, the poor families, mostly Black and Hispanic, to have to go to one school that's underperforming. There's no reason why, if a parent is willing to drive their child to a school that has an open seat, that they should be denied that. That's what they're doing. They're forcing kids into basically a ghetto, and that's creating them a disadvantaging them with a collaborative learning environment and inequitable with resources. And that's something that should stop. We should be supporting. If there's a school, and there are parents that will do this. There are parents that have to take their kids and escort a bus past gang infested streets. If they're willing to do that, we should be there to help them and allow them to go to different schools. Now, do we have? This is the superintendent report.
And let's dispose of a myth that these government school anti-choice advocates are espousing. So there's the notion that if you have school vouchers, that it would segregate schools. That will not happen. That what the school voucher and the choice movement is suggesting is that Fairfax County spends about $22,000 to $23,000 per child every single year on that. So we don't want to give $4,000 stipend. We want to give the whole $22,000 to the family. That will be more than enough to spark choice and spark a proliferation of private schools, or be allowed to use it in charter schools that can get that money. And what's more, for the special education parents, the states that have gone to school choice, particularly for the charters, you get a amount depending on the level of need of your special education child. So you may get $30,000 or $50,000 that follows your child, so that the private schools can adequately care for those needs. So all this mumbo jumbo and the lies and the misinformation that's put about the left about school choice hurting any kids anywhere, that's nonsense. You would never allow the government to tell you which doctor you had to see, even if you're on Medicaid, if you're on CHIP or Medicare. We just simply want the same thing for public funded education. Let parents choose what's best for them.
Well, speaking of which, let's talk about what one of these advocates has. Do we have the rest of that clip? Let's talk about how let's give us the face of those that are fighting for racial justice and equity. We have that clip and footage from TJ. Let's see. Sam, you got it or no? You had it.
Okay, let's see what Michelle Reed is gonna put out. I mean, this
all right, fine. Let's go to that. Let's go to that.
Propaganda. 10 minutes.
All right, maybe we can bring the volume up.
And while we're looking at Michelle Reed, let's remember that her school's in North Shore School District in Washington State. She arrived in 2016. And at that time, the kids there in a very affluent district learned an incredible amount. They had very high growth scores. Think about that as how fast you're running in a race, right? You may start from a little bit of a deficit, a little bit behind the starting line, or you may start ahead of the starting line. But what's really important is how fast you're running, because after 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, if you're running fast, you're going to excel. Michelle Reed took kids that were running really fast, and by the end of her term in North Shore, the kids were running below average speed. They got slower and slower and slower every single year that she was there. And this is not my word. This is what's on the state report card. Michelle Reed said in a recent town hall that she had no idea where this information came from, even though it's on her district's school report card on the state website. Let me ask you a question. If you have a superintendent who worked for 5 years in Washington State School District and was ignorant about what the state was publishing about her school district, would you think that person is competent to be dog catcher, much less the superintendent of Fairfax County Public Schools? I mean, she actually probably did know what it did, but she is knowingly putting out false information and lying. Why anybody would hire a congenital liar to run a school district in the interest of kids, I think everybody can figure out that question. This school board has no intention of putting what's in the best interest of kids. It's solely their propagandist in chief.
You know, that's a great point, Brian. I think she really believes she's doing great, even if scores plummeted and children were doing poorly and their schools were closed the longest. Like, the goal is never about academic excellence, learning academics or reading, writing, and arithmetic. I mean, the goal is about, like, this kind of, you know, they've usurped the term equity. Equality doesn't exist anymore, but they use this term equity in like a very strange kind of, it doesn't matter if you learn anything. It's just that we all agree on the same soft principles. Like, and that's what they've turned equity into. And I think if you ask her, do you think that you did a great job at North Shore? She would say yes, and she could probably pass a lie detector test because those are her priorities.
Yeah, it's making sure that if you suck, you all suck equally, you know, and you know, consistency. You know, it's consistent.
Sam, if you scroll down on the left, you'll see a tab that says growth on the left, I think. That may be the mobile view. You see it should say student growth. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So they brought in, I mean, Stephanie, you're right. They did hijack the term equity. Equity is supposed to be tailored. There's a place for equity. And we're seeing how they create greater inequities within the school system and what they're doing. They're rewarding different third-party actors, you know, that come in. You can be a community for schools that can come in and get contracts and money and perpetuate a problem so they can continue that revenue stream. And in this case, you know, they're victimizing Black and Hispanic households when they're doing it.
Brian, I don't mean to interrupt you, Harry, but I am clicking that link to student growth, and there's nothing there.
Nothing there? Yeah. Well, just think about it. These kids are getting...
You have a dynamic page is kind of on a lower resolution, like a mobile view.
No, the link doesn't work.
The link isn't working.
My computer's fine, and my PDF player was working just fine. The link isn't working.
Just think with these kids with this learning loss in the single digits, what's that's going to do? Is that going to contribute to the school to prison pipeline? I would likely say probably would. They created a lot of societal issues.
Well, coupled with the mental health issues that we've seen, I mean.
Yeah.
So what did you, Brian? Do you remember the
page.
stats on the student growth? Do you remember? Was it standardized test scores?
We have the data where the standardized test scores went down, and this is despite allowing repeat.
See, when I click it, it just takes me back to the front page, guys.
Oh, sure. Oh.
Yeah, maybe that's something they might have brought down.
You know, I think it's because of the responsive nature of the screen, right? When you have a small screen, it doesn't show because it projects on the right. So what I can do is I can take a screenshot of it, a quick screenshot, and then send it to you that you can display.
I think I get what you're saying. It's using frames or something, yeah. Let me pull it over. Hold on. There it is. I got it.
So I'll post this.
I got it right
picture.
there, Brian. It's up.
Okay, you got it?
Oh, there it is.
Awesome. And then if you click on trend at the top, there's a little, right there. What you'll see is it shows over the years how much they grew. And again, if you're at the 60th percentile for a whole district where you kind of average out, that's really high. So they start out running at 58th percentile, which is well above average. They're running really fast. And then after she gets there, they go down to 53, and then the 52, and then the 51, and eventually all the scores are at 49th percentile or 48th percentile. That means that her kids, even though with a very expensive budget, a very affluent district, are running more slowly than other districts around the country. When she got there, they were running really fast. And, some of them were ahead of grade level. Some of them may have been behind, but if they were behind, they were catching up. If they were ahead, they were getting further ahead. But after she got there and dumbed down the school district, they were all running slower than other kids around the country.
Brian, she's given an update. She's given. I'm gonna go back to live real quick because she's actually on giving an update here, talking about demographics and the budget and such. So let me pause that thought.
Okay.
That district is a tenth the size of
to
Fairfax
grow.
County, too.
Since 2019, our English learners and economically disadvantaged students saw gains of approximately 5 percentage points, while our Hispanic students have seen a gain of over 8 percentage points. Additionally, for the 4th year in a row, students with disabilities graduated at rates higher than the division average. We continue to keep equity at the center of all that we're doing and celebrate our successes, even as we embrace opportunities and challenges to improve. Our student voice continues to be at the center of our experience. I think as Student Representative Togby said this evening and shared her expectations for how the division may look in the next several years, as well as encouraging student colleagues around the division to join us for our community conversations. Student voice is going to be critical to our work moving forward and our strategic planning as we move forward.
So if you see
with a continued focus on equity, we're going to pay particular attention.
They're all 49, 48, 46, 49, 44, 44. That's running well below average, even though when she got there, they were running faster than average. This is what she's about to do for Fairfax.
And that's only a tenth of the size of our district, right, Brian? Like they're a lot smaller than we are too. So
and less diverse, much less diverse.
Families. After our leadership kickoff, we recommitted ourselves to this orientation and the work we have ahead of us.
She doesn't care about learning. All she cares about is indoctrination, political ideology, and equity. If all these quote equity strategies worked, you would see supposedly the beneficiaries of equity, minority students, different people from the LGBTQ community, whatever, you would see their test scores rise. But if you notice, they never show you any, hey, here's our policy and here's where scores rose, because they didn't. They actually fell. In other words, if my whole identity is wrapped up in my sexuality or my racial status, am I going to learn how to think critically? Am I going to learn knowledge? No, I'm going to dwell on the differences between us and get into political indoctrination. But that's their goal. They see schools as just as the Mao did, as a way to indoctrinate his followers and get them for future votes. They could care less about their careers.
Teaching them, it's almost criminal. Oh, is she talking about her listening tour? They really touted the family engagement survey.
Myself, I think, and those who were there a great deal.
And Harry, weren't you saying that it was only like 4% or something of like?
Yeah, only 4% really. Yeah, just enough that you could probably handpick enough parents that you would want to fill out those surveys.
Yeah, it seems like there's a sample bias there.
The only questions. Yeah. First of all, I asked 4 questions. I was fortunate to get asked 4 questions. She didn't answer a single one. And then when you go and take the survey, it didn't say, did she answer your question? Or did she provide any useful information? The only question on the survey was, did you feel heard? Did you feel heard? Did we listen and blow off your questions, right? Is effectively what they're saying. And if you feel like somebody heard what you're saying, even though they ignored you or basically slapped you down and saying, we don't care about kids, then you're supposed to answer yes, right? I mean, this is patently ridiculous. She's about to destroy the district, and she goes on a propaganda tour.
Well, she will destroy the district, particularly if the school board gets elected next year. I mean, it'll tank. I mean, it's already gone down.
Yeah, I think this school board hired her in particular for a reason. There were a number of parents who came forward and said, it's time for you guys need to go back to the drawing board on this. And they found the one they wanted. I don't know. Maybe she'll try to be autonomous, but it seems to me like she'll do what she did at North Shore and also just be a puppet of what we already have now on the school board, which hasn't been great. Oh, facilities. I think they're about to talk about the SEL. Harry, you were talking about the third party, the contractors, and they brought in Panorama to do the SEL, the social emotional learning screener.
Oh boy!
And they paid Panorama $2.4 million for a 5-year contract, and this is just for surveys twice a year.
For surveys twice a year, we don't know how we already know that Panorama doesn't really invest much in securing of that student data. And not only that, we're doing customized dashboards. For those of you who are unfamiliar with social emotional learning, they use it as a metric to kind of gauge and to identify students for even early intervention if they're not necessarily, as Brian mentioned before, if they're drinking the Kool-Aid, so to speak, of what's being pushed to them. So those students that might come from other political ideologies can easily be identified through the survey process, and it is invasive. The information isn't secure as well. And not only that, but there's not just the SEL survey. It's also these use of free tools that you have to sign off as a parent, learning tools. Considering the budget, a lot of these free tools, I mean, they're not free. That comes with a cost, and the product is the person that's using it. And that's, again, going back to inferences, finding out what your preferences are, your web searches, and it's just collecting a profile and a snapshot. You're actually having people developing a complete picture of your child, and they're using that to shape and influence them.
They ask some questions that you're kind of like, they say that they're looking into like the emotional well-being of your children, but one of the questions that they ask, and somebody I know actually refers to one of these screeners as the white privilege screener. Let me see what the question is. I can find it.
I think what parents need to ask themselves.
The question is, how often do you think about what someone of a different race, ethnicity, or culture experiences? How is that about? I mean, that's an interesting question you might have as a family or among your friendship circle. But like, why is the school getting involved in that? And how is that about your emotional well-being?
Yeah,
there's a lot of questions like that where you're like, this is not your business.
It's inappropriate. You're trying to instill a sense of white guilt in kids. You know, it's not, you know,
but
it's
not just, but like, I mean,
they don't even try to argue that these surveys or this instruction improves outcomes. Like, you've never seen any data that it improves outcomes for anybody. It doesn't align to that. This is solely about political indoctrination, and it's about framing issues, right? And the question is, with our scores having fallen so much, and with us so far behind, why would any money or any amount of the precious time during the school day be spent on anything other than catching kids up?
That would make sense, and that's what a reasonable person would be. You know, I think what parents need to ask themselves. I'm sorry. I was going to say, like, I think what parents need to ask themselves when they look at voting for these school board members is, are they going to implement policies that's going to tear your family apart? I mean, these surveys are asking and collecting data. Yeah, it's a great question, because they're asking questions to kids. Who would you reach out to at the school with a secret that you want to keep from your parents? Like, they're encouraging kids to keep secrets to keep secrets from their parents. That's the last thing you want to do as a parent.
On the middle school survey, and again, I don't know if this is just a particular middle school or across the district, they asked the children, name an adult inside or outside of school that you trust. Why would you do that? I mean, why would, I hope everyone has an adult that they can trust, but why does this school need to know which adult that is? Like, this is
considering how they're not screening them for, considering how they don't really screen them very well if they're predators, i.e. Darren Thornton issue.
Yeah.
I mean, any counselor, or particularly any family counselor, particularly for kids who gone through separation of their parents or divorce, would tell you that the most destructive behavior one parent can do to another is to tell their child to keep secrets, from the other parent. And certainly this is the typical behavior of groomers. Every single groomer of a kid establishes secrets between that adult groomer and the child. And yet that is exactly what the schools are encouraging kids to do. They're saying, we won't tell your parents, even though the parents have a legal right to know. And even, let's say that a kid is being abused. You go to report it to Child Protective Services, and Child Protective Services makes a decision. The parents can go into court They can make their case at Child Protective Services. They have a legal way to do that. With Fairfax schools, they're telling you, you will never know. We are going to keep secrets with your kids. We're going to counsel your kids and tell them to keep secrets from you. And you will never know. You will never even be able to go to court and challenge us. That is literally what Mao and Marxist countries do, is they try to destroy the nuclear family, separate kids from their parents, and say the government is the one who runs your life and controls your upbringing. And it's just shocking that they don't even try to deny it.
Can we bring up those slides on the teacher training? Speaking of that, like, I don't know if we talked about that last time, but you know, how it's like, the teacher training in Fairfax County, we won't tell your parents if you identify as a different gender or want to change your name in the school system. Sam, I sent those slides to you, but anyways, they held we don't necessarily need the slides, but they held that teacher training, and to your point, Brian, that's exactly what they were, and a lot of the teachers are uncomfortable with that, but that's what the school board implemented in teacher training, is all this private information about these kids. If it's a gender identity issue, we're not telling the parents. Teachers aren't allowed to tell them. Secrets. And
notice that even with these teachers, the teacher training, I mean, you know something's not right when they try to go through the greatest extent possible to prevent teachers from walking away with that training material. Like, clearly what they want teachers to know, what they're teaching kids, they want to keep it from you as a parent. Why? I mean, there's nothing that there should be that controversial in the content that you're having training the teachers on, or having teachers events to your kids, that we shouldn't be able to see as the parent. We're the ones that are most vested with children, not the teachers. We're the ones that raise the kids. We're the ones that are invested with them throughout their entire lives.
And to everybody who's watching, I tell everybody who will listen, ask your kids, what are you learning? Did you take a survey? And then you have a federal right to email the school and say, send me those slides, send me that survey. I would like to read it. I do that quite frequently. I want to see all of it. I want to see all the surveys. And what I found, I've already found two. They weren't even from the SEL. They weren't even from Panorama, but already 2 surveys implemented by the schools asking for very private information. And one was administered in a PE class, and they didn't tell the children it was optional. And in fact, for the kids who didn't take it, because I always tell my kids, don't take it. It's not their business unless it's an assignment, and I want to see all of your assignments. Unless it's an assignment, don't take those surveys. The teachers walk around like, you haven't submitted that survey yet. What about that survey? They don't say, oh, it's optional. You must have not submitted it because, you know, it's an optional thing and you chose not to. And they didn't notify me that that particular survey was being implemented, and it included gender identity. So,
you know, public education is a right. We have a right to public education. Parents shouldn't have to make a false choice of whether or not they don't feel safe, you know, sending their kids to these schools because they're trying to influence them. I think the slides, I think I can get them to you, Sam. Updated curriculum.
Did they ever pass the revisions to FLE? Was that I looked in the agenda before. I didn't see anything about the updated FLE. This stuff. I know that they tabled it in the July meeting. I don't think they passed it yet. I wondered if they're waiting for parents to not pay attention, but that's not going to happen. I don't know.
See if I have it. Well, I mean, it was on the news that the entire
for every student that goes to these schools, $18,500 goes to the school, right? Like 18,000. That's what it was last year, I think. And I would love to have the $18,500 and just choose the school.
That's just operating expenses, right? So, like, if you're a business, you have to pay, you know, mainly your employees. You have to pay for costs, but you also have to pay rent, which are, you know, kind of capital expenses. So when you consider, you know, their facilities and capital costs, it's well over $22,000, $23,000 per year. So that's what, like, for example, a tutor or the equivalent of a private school could get from a public voucher if we were to implement that.
My only question is that with vouchers is that can you implement them to scale? But yeah, I definitely think vouchers would be great for especially for special needs, because I mean this equity their model of how they envision equity doesn't work well with those with disabilities. It doesn't.
So I have to tell you about a friend of mine has a son with an IEP, and those children have definitely been suffering the worst because of the COVID and being out of school. The school board kept everybody out of school for a year and a half, but I think the people who suffer the worst are the ones who need the extra help. And her son, he didn't pass at grade level a couple of his SOLs, and this was at the end of last year. And they sent her a letter that said, well, he didn't pass the SOL at grade level, but here's the good thing. He failed it by less than he failed last year's SOL. So he actually is getting better. And the strangest, that's a very strange letter to receive as a parent. But the other problem with that is he hadn't actually taken an SOL the previous year. So she wondered, did all parents who have children with IEPs or who have children who didn't pass the SOLs get this letter? Like, he failed. He didn't pass at grade level, but don't worry. He failed, not quite as badly as last year. Like, what is happening? Is that the new metric? And also, are we just going to lie about who took SOLs?
If you notice, this school board actively filed lawsuits against special education parents to keep documents that the parents had obtained from being publicized, even though there was no student identifying information in there. So think about this school board is doing a horrific job for special education. Special education parents exercise their right under the Freedom of Information Act, FOIA, to get documents. And then the school board sues them to suppress those documents. And think about all the special education kids who had their IEP denied or services denied. The school board ended last year with $90 million in the budget that they couldn't even spend, even though I'm sure they denied a ton of services for special education parents. Why any special education parent would vote for any of these school board members is beyond belief.
Yeah, this is the same school board denied these children a year of school. Any parent deny these kids a year of school. They create bureaucratic hurdles for them to get an IP. They've implemented cruel, disciplinary measures, isolating kids within socially idolizing, physically restraining them, and then they take and bully parents and sue them and take them to court to suppress that information, prevent it from becoming public. Such wonderful human beings they are. So, Sam, I just posted the slides that we were talking about earlier. You should see that in there on the channel. This is where the training curriculum, where they're encouraging students to keep secrets from their parents. Wow, we haven't even made it to explicit material in libraries, have we?
No, I definitely don't think they're going to be. Oh, it's already 9. They're not going to be on time for as per usual.
Oh, no.
I think they did fewer platitudes today, right? I mean, last year was what meeting? One of their last meetings was the worst. It was like 2 hours of the back padding, but
I have that.
It was. Yeah, there's more, right? Where I think if you scroll through it, it's more than just the one. And just think they're going to try to integrate this into some biased incident reporting system, which is going to be overly vague, generic, disruptive, especially when the question is, how are schools going to implement this gonna have to hire in additional administrators.
Well, I've talked to a few administrators and teachers, and that's what all of them ask me. Do you know about who's implementing this? And I'm like, well, and these are people who actually are probably going to be in charge of implementing it. And I'm like, well, I'm trying to get that information from school board members, but nobody will tell me anything. They just have this grand idea about thought policing our children, but they don't actually know how they're going to implement it, or if you're
how they're going to implement thought police.
Enforcing it. Yeah. That's to be determined. We don't know. Like
they literally are. They've implemented a handicapper general under their term of equity, and they have the thought police.
So while we're looking at this slide, let's take a pause for a second, right? One of the goals of the left is to change the language, to take a term and completely reverse what it means. So let's take the word discrimination.
Brian, let's talk about this, right? Because we're wearing purple, right? Because like there's a center, right? And a lot of people in Fairfax consider themselves left, right? So what do you mean by left? Define left, because a lot of people consider. I even consider myself left of center at one time until I realized that the left went way left.
So they fell off the cliff.
Yeah, till it fell off the cliff. So define left. Let's not. You have some parents that are like, "Hey, I'm a Democrat." It's like I'm not. Just define left so we can frame that for it. So what we're talking about here.
Sure thing. People can disagree on where resources need to be spent, but typically in the terms of left versus right. There are folks who say, hey, I have my opinions and my beliefs, but I'll let you have your opinions and your beliefs, and we can disagree. You'll use yours, I'll use mine. What I mean by the left, there are those who want to control language, control thought, control terms, or control the behavior of others, particularly when it doesn't infringe on your rights. So let's talk about the word discrimination, for example, right? Which is try to be levied. When you go and you pick out a movie, do you discriminate based on which movies you watch?
Yeah,
yes,
absolutely. We all do.
When you go to a restaurant, do you discriminate on which restaurant you pick or the quality of items in there? Yes. When you pick players for a cheerleading team or a sports team or the band about who gets first chair or who is the starting quarterback, do you discriminate against who is selected?
Absolutely.
Yeah. When you give out awards,
right?
When you give out awards for good behavior, for leadership, do we discriminate on who is selected? Yes. Discrimination is not a negative trait. Discrimination against protected characteristics, and particularly by government officials, may be illegal. But if a Muslim student disagrees with some cultural policy of another student and discriminates against that, that is their religious belief. It has no bearing on the other student. For example, they don't want to sit beside somebody who's basically wearing a bikini to school, and they don't want to sit at that table. They're making a choice, but that Muslim student is certainly entitled to do that based on their culture. Now, if a teacher or a principal singles out a student who's following the dress code, that is illegal. That is discrimination, potentially based on their outfit or based on their perceived religion or culture or something, right? So all of these rules, when they give training to a teacher, that applies to the teacher. But Stephanie, one of your points is they're trying to control the speech of students, right? Students can believe that abortion is wrong and say, hey, we don't want that, promoted in their schools, or we don't want, that advocated. They can take a whole variety of things. None of that, all of that is fine. That is their personal culture. If you have a problem with another student or with the schools allowing students to show their beliefs, and you want to change, for example, the definition of discrimination, or discrimination is always bad. We have to accept everything. We have to accept pedophiles, right? I mean, technically, if you say pedophilia is bad, that's discrimination. That's quote unquote hate speech, right? So
they prefer minor attracted persons.
Exactly. The impetus is to change the meaning of the word sex, the meaning of the word gender, the meaning of the word hate speech, the meaning of the word discrimination. All of that gets back to an autocratic, totalitarian view. You can come up with a new word, right? But the reason why they want to change the words that already exist is because they know that their radical agendas on what somebody's expressed identity for that day is, right? Remember, these are the same people who said, if I feel like a girl one day, I can go into the girls' bathroom and see people undressed. If I feel like a boy the next day, I can choose. It's not an immutable characteristic. I can choose to go in the boys' bathroom the next day, right? So they want to change what it means to be a male or a female. And just like they want to change racism, right? So racism has a very pejorative meaning for a reason, because it means that you believe that people are biologically inferior or superior, right, to other groups. That's obviously very harmful. If you say, hey, white men can't jump, right? That and saying, hey, it's because they're white, that's one thing. If you say, hey, in general, a stereotype is white people prefer a certain kind of music. That's not that's not racism. That's just, hey, that's an observation of, white people or Hispanic people in general tend to observe something. And they don't want to say, hey, that's prejudice or that's stereotyping, because those don't have the same sting attached to it. They want to call it, they want to redefine what racism means, for example, and try to escalate everything.
I would agree, especially when you say white men can't jump, because that's just factually inaccurate. If anyone were to look at my pinned tweet on Twitter, it clearly shows that white people can jump at the last in-person Fairfax NAACP meeting, when you see black people actually show up to a meeting. So you can see my Twitter channel, Harry J for Justice. I brought black members to an NAACP meeting, and it was very interesting. They weren't used to that. We're used to seeing black people at an NAACP meeting.
So then you're saying that white people can jump. That was the proof.
They certainly can, and they can run. There is a thing called white lightning. Yes.
Brian, Fairfax Parent on our YouTube channel would like to take issue with your comparing discrimination in schools to choosing a restaurant. And they wanted to compliment you on your first-rate intellect.
Mm-hmm. So what we did, it sounds like they have some reading comprehension problems, right? We want to be precise with our language, right? So for example, what is diversity? Diversity could mean different colors for napkins. It could mean different heights of kids. It could mean, different hairstyles. But most times they've tried to narrow down and say diversity implies racial diversity. In other words, we're going to have a quota on skin tone. Harvard is not diverse, right? Let's repeat that. Harvard is not diverse. Harvard is racially diverse, right? I think it has 15 to 20% black. It has 25% Asian. It has all these whites, but it's not diverse with respect to ideology. 96% of the students and professors say they are in the radical left. So when somebody says something is diverse, that is imprecise. That is inaccurate. It is vague and void. That person is not educated. That person has demonstrated that the government school education doesn't allow them to effectively communicate. And what they want to do is they want to change the word diversity to, by definition, mean racial diversity, which means you can't talk about any other kind of diversity, right? And they want to change the language. And when people allow that to happen, so anytime you hear, hey, we want diversity, you're like, okay, so we need people who have conservative and libertarian views as well. Is that what you're saying? Just ask them that every time. And they'll get frustrated because their attempts to change all these meanings will have failed, right? And if that lady would like to come on here and debate, I'm more than welcome to. I will meet her here. I will meet her anytime if she wants to put her quote intellect up with our questions. So
in all fairness, Mr. Davison, we do not know the gender that Fairfax Parent is
we will
ascribed
also,
to
hold on.
this evening.
We actually have, we'll even put up like the Zoom channel later up with extra people that we actually have our own community participation where we take on all comers. So, I mean, it's not like, they can even bring their tribe, so they don't have to feel like it's just like 1 against 3 or just one-on-one against Mr. Davison. So, I mean, if they want to make an argument or a point, that's fine. But when they talk about like racial discrimination, I think we've clearly articulated how this school board does engage in like racial discrimination and that putting in architectures that are inequitable within our school system. I just brought it. We just look at the Whitman Sandberg, how they've segregated not only Black and Hispanic students, but even the teacher workforce. I mean, like the teacher workforce, those of color, they have to work in those areas. They don't spread them out throughout the rest of the county. So this is the work of our school. It's really insincere when they talk about equity or diversity.
But let's be clear a little bit in terms of this discussion of discrimination. There's lots of things that they could do to improve equality or equality of opportunity, right? But when we consider that immigrants to this country who don't naturally speak the language are provided more resources than native-born children in our schools, then one has to question who is discriminating against whom. So let me repeat. If you are a Latin American immigrant whose family has come here and your family doesn't speak the language, you get more resources provided by our taxpayers, even though your family may be paying a small fraction, than poor and disadvantaged kids who were born here. That, in many people's words, would be discrimination against kids because of where they were born in terms of giving resources out. And it's not in the favor of kids who were born in this country, which is generally
define resource. Define resources here. Are you talking like translation support? So parents,
the amount of money and teachers that are providing instruction on average for each student.
I mean, because they get more money if it's Title I. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, they generally put more resources. They may have smaller class sizes, but they get English as a second language teachers. They get other positions in those schools. So there's a certain staffing ratio of the teachers they have to provide for ESL instruction, in addition to the other teachers that they get based on the staffing ratio. So let's say that every 22 students gets a classroom teacher, and then for every 50 students, you also get an ESL teacher on top of that. So they basically get 30 or 40% more in teaching resources than a kid who was, like say a Black kid who was born in poverty here and is going to Fairfax County.
But they're not. We're not struggling with the language barrier. I mean, that's what you're. I think this is what you mean by equity and not being a bad thing. I mean, because you would want to provide that as support. I mean, are you going to talk about getting rid of ESL altogether and maybe have it English language immersion? But we don't have an official language in this country. We don't.
So I'm saying, let's specifically talk about most of these families. If the folks who immigrate here under H-1B or legally speak the language, most of the people who are coming here and do not speak the English language are not authorized to be here, and so they are taking up resources from the poor kids. That we have a lot of needy kids who were born here, who are American citizens, who need to be provided a quality education, and we are giving more resources to people who are not even authorized to be here. For those that, if we wanted to educate those people, we could send down $10,000 a year to their home country and give them a far superior education, based on the cost of living. To do it here. I hear where you're going, but this is like beyond like the authority of what you would say if you were managing a school district, because if you're not, like Fairfax County is a sanctuary city, so you have to provide a quality education to all children. So yeah, you do have to start looking at equitable distribution of resources. The voters
have a problem with that, then we need to have a board of supervisors that are elected that would otherwise make Fairfax not a sanctuary city if that's the concern. I don't see an issue, particularly when you have a $4 billion school budget, that you're allocating resources in an equitable fashion to provide an equal opportunity and for quality education for all students. I mean, I think equity does have a place. It's just like where is it allocated? Now, what I see with the problem with equity is like when you start segregating the kids all into one school, that's the problem. You should not be doing that because you have parents who have grit. There are parents of children with grit and with talent that will drive and will make that sacrifice to put their kids into a better environment. And I think parents should have that choice. I might disagree with you. I disagree with you, like, say that that's an issue, but $4 billion, and we haven't had an audit in 20 years. That's not something I would even be considering, even cutting.
Yeah, there's plenty of money in that budget if you cut the waste, and you can move it over. Like, yes, ESL is going to be important.
But I'm saying you do agree that we are spending significantly more money to educate ESL students than we are general education students, right?
Because you have to, because they don't speak the language. There's a language barrier, and you want to provide them the support structure. You want to provide an education environment that is tailored to meet the individual needs of each student. That includes like special needs, that includes gifted kids. You want kids to be able to reach their potential. So I'm fine with tailoring educational resources per child. I mean, I think what we're talking about, what's really has gone off the rails is a lot of wasteful spending that the school board has done. For example, spending $20,000 for a critical race CRT lecture. That's got to go away. I mean, let's look at the construction budget. Let's look at, where are they?
$2.4 million for surveys.
For surveys, right? Why are they looking at spending $70 million to expand West Springfield instead of sending the kids over to Mount Vernon High School, which is under capacity? I mean, these are things that we should be asking ourselves. And why aren't we looking at public-private partnerships and having more lab schools in the area to provide additional STEM resources? These are things that we should be looking at. Why are we not partnering with automotive industry, refrigerator manufacturers, to provide technical training for our kids?
I guess the question I have issue with, Harry, is need, right? The word need. Mm-hmm. Need is, by definition, subjective. Would you agree with that?
Brian,
that's a complicated question.
That's a complicated, but Brian, when you got families who are living like 4 families in a 2-bedroom apartment, I can't go with you on that one. It's I mean, there's.
So you think especially certain families need to have their debt forgiven, and other families don't need to have their student debt forgiven?
I didn't say debt forgiven. I'm talking about when you're providing. Yeah. That's a different question.
No, I mean,
I think
Harry, that You asked me what the term left was, and we're Shutterboard. We can have different.
Yeah, I did. I asked you. I did.
The word need is a Marxist term, right? So I'm not trying to say all of your views are Marxist, but I'm saying part of what's being specific about language is we say, okay, we're going to give every student we may give, hey, here's $20,000 per year to go to college, or here's some aid. When all of a sudden you have the word need, right? It's somebody. Some government official is going to determine who needs what. And by the definition of equity means I'm going to determine different students have different needs based on my subjective evaluation. And oftentimes it implies that if they don't have the same equal outcome, then we have to adjust the needs until they do. Right?
No, well, first of all, I don't define equal outcome. Okay, that's not the definition of equity. Equity is providing equal opportunity. Okay, so you can't force equal outcomes because we all have different abilities. Equal outcome is just not the way it's not realistic. Mm-hmm. Equity for equal opportunity, for example, if you have a needs-based scholarship for colleges, that's one thing, because you do want to promote diversity within the classroom. Diversity of thought is included in that because it adds to the collaborative learning environment. I have no problem with equity to provide equal opportunity for students. If they have a child who comes here legally or illegally, but if they don't speak the language, you provide them the resources for English as a second language so that because they probably will become a citizen, you want them to be successful within our society and contribute back to society. That is the term of equity, provide them the equal opportunity to provide those resources where they can excel.
So, for instance, all students' parents, or all students have the opportunity to have their parents left out of rather
Yeah. Well, there's a comment that says that's not equity. Yeah, equal opportunity is equality. I mean, you just can't necessarily say, hey, everybody can apply, and this is the process you go through.
No, I understand what you're saying. I think you missed my point.
Yeah.
Look at the screen.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. No, I was adjusting one of the comments on the YouTube.
Yeah. I'll pull that up.
Because no, that is absolutely well. No, I think the last one, you probably don't. If a student wants to use a private bathroom, the student can use a private bathroom. I mean, that's a reasonable person, but you don't want to necessarily jeopardize the safety of someone else to affirm somebody else to affirm somebody else's feelings there. I was going to address like the one thing that says what equity. Yeah.
Let's apply it to teaching real quick, right? So, or Harvard or UNC are the cases going before the Supreme Court, right? That there is active discrimination by Harvard and University of North Carolina to discriminate in favor of some students who identify as a certain race, right? It's not like they're doing blood samples, right? It's you volunteer what Elizabeth Warren got a scholarship and all these preferences because she identified as Native American, right? So they're actively discriminating against that. And you can say, okay, at least we want to be honest and say that, hey, if we gave everybody $10,000 or a $20,000 voucher, for example, then they can spend it as they want, either on higher education or K-12 or whatever, right? That would be equal opportunity. But when we say, I'm going to determine what your need is, right, and we're going to give some students more than others, that is discriminating against students. Now, we may try to justify that and say we have a compelling need and things like that. But we are, let's be honest and say we're not actually discriminating against Hispanic students. In fact, for many of the Hispanic students who have English as a second language, we are discriminating in favor of them. Would you deny that? Right?
I mean, yeah. When I think of like equity and like education, I'm thinking like with Harvard admissions, like if your household income is less than $50,000, they don't charge you tuition. You still have to have the talent to make it through that program in order to succeed. You have the opportunity to be there, whether you succeed or fail. And that's kind of like what, like I said, like what you're using when you start talking, and you can't run away from the term equity because it's already, you have to address it and lean into it and talk about what place was equity have. I mean, certainly we're all for equality, but
I would counter that. I would challenge your argument that that's actually discrimination or equity. So let's say I'm an NFL team and I'm drafting a player. Looking at a player from a top school like University of Alabama, got the best coach.
I mean,
and then I'm looking at another player. I'm looking at another player from like North Dakota State, right? I'm going to project that North Dakota State player may be better in a couple of years, even though right now they're not, because they had better access to training. That's not really discriminating.
Hold on. What colleges did you compare? North Carolina and North Dakota State.
I'm sorry, North Dakota State and Alabama.
Okay. Well, Carson Wentz went to North Dakota State. North Dakota State has about 4 to 5 NFL players each year go to the draft. They won the FCS championship for like 4 years.
It's not the same. They don't have the same facilities. Okay. I'm saying the reason they're drafted is they see a gem in the rough, right? And what I'm saying is if a school like Harvard were doing that and saying, hey, these kids coming from a poor background, we think in the future they're going to score an outstanding score. That's one thing. But what's happening at places like, TJ and Harvard and University of North Carolina, they're saying this is a minority kid from a very affluent neighborhood and a very affluent school who scores 200 points less than like say an Asian student from a similarly affluent school. We don't think that there's going to be any difference in growth. We just want to give it to this person because of their race. That's
I don't think you can say that. Yeah, that's wrong. That's wrong. I mean, like, let's talk about like, what about like the University of Texas system where it's like every valedictorian at high school gets admission can get admitted to University of Texas at Austin, right? I mean, you're going to have varying kids. You're going to show a different talent. They're not all going to be but they're all going to be able to be able to handle that curriculum and talent. But I mean, that would be something that would, in my worldview, work. But I hear what you're saying. Equal resources, you're using race as a determining factor. No. I mean, if there's socioeconomic factors, that's one thing. But if it's based by race, no. That's the problem we have with TJ admissions. They did it by race. They tried to use geography as a proxy by race. Look at what they tried to do with the merit lottery position. So that was blatantly racist.
Can we listen to a little bit of word salad?
I also just had a question on how food rolled out this year. I know we lost federal funding for a large portion of that. I don't know, Ms. Burden, if you want to comment on that, or where did we leave off? Were we able to salvage funding from other sources? I know that was a discussion at the end of a budget cycle last year.
Ms. Burden?
The federal government stopped doing free food for all. And so we are essentially, as far as the revenue is concerned, back to business as usual, which means that students that are eligible for free and reduced lunch, of course, receive their meals free, and all others pay the meal fee for breakfast or lunch.
Can someone speak to the impact of that, or have we, what we've heard from families? I mean, that was huge, right, as a shift for what we were able to offer in the past. And were there partnerships explored to see what we might fill in?
Hey, Sam, let me comment on this, right? Because she's either incredibly ignorant or incredibly greedy. So the free and reduced lunch program is a form of social aid because the schools are an efficient way to give it out, right? Where the federal government pays for the food and for a lot of the costs, and it's distributed to the families who don't have the means. The past couple of years, the federal government said just to ease the administrative burden, we're going to give it even to rich families. This lady, Arora Mesh, is now begging for rich families to be able to freeload off the government and get free breakfasts and lunches, right? I mean,
our lunch is free.
Last year they were, this year they're not.
Unless the whole point
is income.
People who can pay for it shouldn't be freeloading off the government. I mean, Harry, when you ask what the left means, this is exactly what the left means. When the government means us, really the taxpayer, is expected to pay for everything for everybody from cradle to grave.
So that's just an area of continuous thinking, inclusion, outreach, that kind of thing. Because I know the families struggled when that was cut off. Another piece I wanted to elevate was regarding...
This is aggressive ignorance, where she has no clue what she's talking about, and she's aggressively spreading her ignorance over and over again to the public.
People aren't happy, so I don't know if there's going to be thought. I'm sure there's going to be some reflection time given to that, because this was our first opportunity to really experience that this year. So I just wanted to flag it for your consideration. I'm not saying we want to change it necessarily, but it would, benefit from your reflection. And then I also wanted to just bring back, last year we had committed some funds to telemental health. I wouldn't be me if I didn't bring this up. So
There was so much waste during that free food program for everybody. I heard multiple accounts from students I know just in the neighborhood as they weren't allowed to go get free fries or something like that. So they had to go take an entire lunch for free. And then they would eat the fries or whatever they wanted and throw away everything else. And these are kids whose parents probably had combined incomes of over $200,000. That was the free lunch program. It's just surprising to me that she would be pushing for that to continue.
Larry Boston in YouTube comments. Communism? Really?
Well, I don't know. I mean, my opinion is with as much money as they have in this budget, I mean, that's probably something we should be covering anyway, because you don't want to have food insecurity, and it's just creating an issue. That's just my personal opinion. I'm trying to figure out something here. Okay.
I think, but they still offer food for people under a certain income. And presumably people over that income would still have, like, they still have food.
Yeah.
I mean,
hey, do we want to wrap it up? I think we're going to lose some support here if for tonight. You there?
I'm gonna need to step away, but I can leave the stream up on this scene if you would like, and you all can have at it. I'm not on camera anyway.
All right, we can do that.
Would you like me to go ahead and do that?
Yeah.
What agenda
for right now?
Where are we on the agenda, you said?
Yes.
Okay, Harry, just ping me on my cell phone if you need anything, okay?
Okay.
I'll go ahead and let the stream run, and you've got concurrent viewers right now, so.
I think we have legislative. Are we on 3.05 legislative program development? Is that?
You said we're on.
Probably not right. No. Maybe it's 4.03. No, I don't know. Actually, I'm not sure. We've been talking, so I haven't been following.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to step up in a second here because I gotta stretch my legs.
I mean, I think we had a YouTube commenter who was talking about, Marxism and socialism, right? There's a myth that the democratic socialism in Europe is effective, right? We don't really teach our kids civics, and America was founded on two basic things. One is that the economic principle of capitalism, private property, you have the right to.
I want to step up for a second.
Reap what you, what the work you put into it. Obviously, there has to be some regulation to prevent monopolies and things like that, but basic economic, capitalism, and that's poorly taught. The second thing is freedom, is that as long as something doesn't infringe upon you, like I can't go, take your land, hit you, murder you, things like that, right? That you have basic freedoms to do as you want. Those are the two basic principles, of America, including, freedom to exercise my religion, to speak, things like that, right? And that has produced more wealth and more opportunity by far than any other place in the world. There's a discussion of Europe is prosperous and they beat us out. No, they don't. Britain, France, Germany, their GDP per capita is about 2/3 of America. They would have to increase by about 50% their average economic output per person to get to America. Democratic socialism is not effective, but that's not taught. People have the impression that Europe is just as prosperous. And if you go down to Southern Europe, Italy, Spain, Greece, all of those, they are far below it. They are closer to like 50%. And so if you ask the question, hey, would you rather have twice as much and live in America under a capitalist system, or would you like to get free lunch every day? And everybody takes a test and we're going to put all the points in the pool and divvy it out equally to everybody, right? That's how you get down to be, in Cuba, which produces maybe $10,000 per person per year, where America produces close to 80,000, right? And so, the fact that most people, and our teachers included, like even the civics teachers, our civics teachers are ignorant about what capitalism means. They are ignorant about how much wealth has been produced by capitalism and by economic policies. And so when we talk about civics education, you can't adequately teach people to vote if they don't know the different outcomes that are generated by different economic policies, right? And so this notion that equity, equal distribution, equal outcomes, right? All of that leads you to be poor, and it leads everybody to be poor. There's, talking to our, a lot of interesting classes are, taught in Fairfax, and there's some where they're going through, ideas of justice, like true political science ideas, right? And one of the concepts is if you don't know what the outcome is going to be at the time, how do you develop policies, right? So one of the questions is, give to my kids is, suppose that you can get an allowance of $15 and your sibling gets $10, right? Or you can get $20 allowance and your sibling will get $25. More than you. Which one will you take? And oftentimes the view of Fairfax in a lot of the teachers unions and other things is they'll take less as long as they get more or as much as somebody else. Even though they're worse off, they're there to spite other people and to limit how much they can grow. And we seriously need to teach kids what these policies mean and how they have an effect. And I guarantee you, if you asked 100 students in Fairfax County Public Schools what the effect of economic capitalism has meant for this country and for their family personally, financially, only maybe one or two could tell you. And the question is, like, we don't even teach, and they talk about, there's different supremacies and stuff. Western culture, and that has been adopted, and this principle has been adopted by other cultures, right? Western culture is superior. It has developed, more art, the more leisure, more wealth than other cultures. And so we want to promote and spread that. But a lot of what you hear from CRT, anti-racism, it's taking in cultures that were tribal or, based on identity politics, anti-capitalists that are socialists, and trying to impose those and they don't like the Constitution. They don't like what Western civilization is about. And so they're trying to fundamentally change it. And that's
Brian,
ultimately
it's interesting that you, specifically with your point to the Constitution, I myself am a constitutionalist, and I've heard just in the beginning, I was really surprised that they're paying so much lip service to the Constitution and Constitution Day in Fairfax County, given that they, seems to me, willfully violate it. So I did find that interesting, like with regard to the school board. My son, I will tell you, aside from the idea of suspending children for misgendering or whatever, the compelled speech that they've already started pushing as young as 4th grade. With regard to the masks, my son wore a mask to school after the Arlington judge put a stay on the order, and the mask said, "This mask is useless." And there was a misunderstanding at the school. An administrator tried to make him take that mask off. And anyways, I had written a book about human rights and how the Constitution and the Bill of Rights applies to children in public schools. So, and I bookmarked it for him because I knew it was going to end up being a problem. And he actually pulled out the book and showed the administrator, actually, I have the constitutional right to be wearing this mask. I'm not, this isn't in violation of anything. So, so there you had a 3rd grader, telling them about the Constitution and what it means. So I guess I'm really, all that to say, I'm really happy that they're celebrating Constitution Day at school. Like, hopefully, people in charge really pay attention to that, and maybe the school board would do well to kind of pick up a copy of the Bill of Rights. Freedom. Have a read. Yeah.
The freedom of speech.
What did the administrator say?
Yeah. Well, she's new at her job, and she's a lovely person, and so she actually said, my mistake. She consulted with a few people, and then they called me at lunchtime, and she was like, I made a mistake, and I was like, hey, when you apologize for making a mistake, you should be forgiven, right? Like, she did the right thing. She apologized for making the mistake, and I moved on, and I still think she's lovely. So, but that happened, and everyone learned from it. So yeah.
But I mean, it goes back. Well, I was saying that teaching core civics. There's a lot of terms. People on both sides say it, right? But teaching core civics and on Constitution Day how this country was founded is a critical principle. And let's talk about, like, say, a voting process or a ball game, right? That we agree before we play the game, before we go to the vote, how the rules are going to work, right? And if somebody tried to change them in the game, we would be upset, right? We could say, hey, we agreed that in order to change the rules, for example, we both have to agree, or there has to be some process, and you have to do that, right? And that's kind of how the thing. The fact of the matter is this country and the states that joined it agreed to the rules ahead of the game. And that was the Constitution, that words meant something in the Constitution. And that the game didn't say, hey, if you join this in 50 years, we can get a 51% majority and change what this word means and then undermine everything you think you're agreeing to. That was never the thing there. The rule was, hey, there's a way to change the Constitution. If you get 2/3 of the people to change it, you can do it. But you can't just alter the meanings of words and fundamentally change what we do now. And if you notice, everything that you're hearing, from what I call the left, Harry, and there's maybe people on the right who do it too, but they're fundamentally trying to change what the terms that were agreed to are without going through the agreed upon process of changing it, right? And so at Stephanie's point, we have a fundamental right as parents to, raise our children. The Federal Education Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA, guarantees us to see all records associated with our kids, right? And when they tell
There's
us
also CCPA,
they don't have to show up.
Yeah, the Child Protective Act, was it CCPA? Protecting student data. And you're right. You're absolutely right, Brian. I mean, they can't impose this over parental rights. They're infringing on parental rights and not demonstrating a compelling need. That's what they're failing to do, to demonstrate a compelling need to keep parents in the dark. And that's the problem. That's simply not acceptable. This is why we need to vote them out.
I mean, I think we probably consider ourselves fortunate that at least with equity, they used a different word than equality. I'm surprised they didn't try to change the meaning of the word equality to mean, equality of outcomes, and then just try to confuse everybody, right? But
yeah, well, that's the scary part when they they try to force equal outcomes, because then they're talking about handicapping kids and reducing the ceiling, preventing opportunities for children to excel. I mean, that's what's the bad part. They're lowering the ceiling lower and lower.
Well, I mean, they're already doing that, right? Like I said, one of my children attends Loudoun schools, and historically they allowed the kids who perform well on their math tests coming out of elementary school to go into a track where they take Algebra 1 in the 7th grade, geometry in the 8th grade. I think a good number of the Fairfax students do it too. So I think we had about 1,700 students, which was I think about a third of all 7th graders taking Algebra 1. Now, let's be clear, the kids who take Algebra 1 in the 7th grade score higher on the Algebra 1 SOL than the 8th graders who take Algebra 1. That's not necessarily because the teachers are better. It's not necessarily because they take it a year early. It's because those kids are talented, right? And they learn quickly and they do well. But if the 7th graders are scoring higher on Algebra 1 than the 8th graders, you can't claim that the 7th graders aren't learning the material, right? This year, Loudoun, without any discussion publicly, added an extra math course of pre-algebra to the curriculum, where only parents who know about it and only parents who request a special test are going to be allowed to take Algebra 1 in the 7th grade.
In 7th grade? Wow.
So now, those kids who are going to be able to take calculus in, say, like the 11th grade, now they can't take it until 12th grade. And as we see in TJ and Langley and other schools, that's a prerequisite for, critical physics classes, for, machine learning, for a lot of different things where you need to use derivatives. The reason they did that was because you had demographic groups scored differently, because some typically didn't achieve the gross scores or the achievement scores to get selected for Algebra 1.
Well, there's a reason for that. Like I said before, this equal outcomes or where they like to do their experiments is particularly Glasgow, Poe, and Holmes, where they would have they put kids, they don't have enough kids in the gifted class. They'll bring other kids who aren't gifted, even as low as a 2nd grade math level, into that class, and have the smart kids bring the dumb kids up to speed. And it works, and to bring them up, but the smart kids don't grow, and this is why you have had kids that are competitive for TJ, and that's what existed, and that's why you've had the lack of representation of Thomas Jefferson. And then there was also grift that was involved with the TJ Partnership Fund, where they only funded field trips for kids in 3rd and 6th grade to get them interested in STEM, but no STEM enrichment activities. And this is where they were paying the executive director who came in a salary of making $12,000, it more than doubled to $250 by the time she was there, which is right before the time when they made all these admissions changes. There was something there. Someone asked, like, how do you vote them out? Because Fairfax is a pretty blue district. I've actually done some talks in other parts of the country, even if it feels that people who are more left, and they kind of there's a lot of common ground. A lot of parents are not for the way the school boards will talk to them. I think we can't talk to you about your kid. We are the school board. We got 200,000 kids. Leave us alone. There are people on the left that with common cause that believe in data privacy, that believe in data privacy, that are opposed to constant surveillance of your children, particularly when it's unwarranted. Or
there's a lot of people on the left now for school choice as well.
There's a lot of people left in school choice. You're right, absolutely, especially minority communities. Black community, overwhelmingly school choice. The only black advocacy group, alleged black advocacy group you'll find that's anti-school choice is the NAACP, and that's because it's 90% white. So it's there's a lot of common ground.
Mm-hmm. Well, here you have gifted programs where the teachers come in, and it even happens in the regular classes where the teachers come in and they ask the more talented kids to help teach the other kids. That is the real discrimination right there, where you have a mix of different students. So you can have kids with 135 IQ and with kids with, like, say, an 85 IQ. Rather the teacher teaching, right? And the real solution is you group them, right? You may have a mix of students, say, in art and maybe in PE and stuff, but in the core classes, science, math, English, you group them so that the teacher can target, hey, I got kids from 120 to 140 IQ. I'm going to, target, they're all kind of on the same page. And then another class that's got 80 to 100, I can target a certain speed, right? But when you ask the brighter kids, the slower kids, not only are they not getting teacher instruction, they're actually having a significant chunk of their day spent where they're asked to teach the other kids. So they don't even get the 7 hours or 6.5 hours they're allowed to learn.
No, they're being used as teacher. They're getting used
that is in Reed's SGP, because the way it works is she may have had all this. In fact, the bottom students may raise their scores, but when you have a gross score, every single student is measured against similar students elsewhere. So if you have a student that's running at a really fast pace, right, in their growth, and they slow down to teach other kids, in a district where you only look at how many kids pass the test, you won't see that. But in a gross score, that kid will all of a sudden, you'll see their speed decrease because they were asked to teach other kids. And that's why you saw Reed's score drop from a fast score, 56 percentile down to 49. And she will try to suppress and eliminate the data that shows that and say, look, we've actually got more kids passing the test, even though a significant number have slowed down and are not achieving it. So it's being very critical going forward to look at all the data and the real data and see how they're trying to hide that. But unless you can educate parents, that the district is not performing, it's very challenging. And to be frank, the school board, they try to control the signal. They'll never come on this program, for example. They'll never have a debate with any of us, right? Because we would answer questions or show that they can't, right?
Oh, no, they can't. All right. Hey, what do you guys, how much later do you guys want to stay up on this? We're going to go through this through the end. They're probably going to go for another
legislative program. I think they will too.
Yeah, I mean.
Contracts awarded. Yeah, it's usually number 15. Number 15 on our agenda is usually where they get sneaky.
Looking at the news,
it's just late.
Contract, right? That's not. I mean, none of that's really the legislative program. They'll go over some stuff, but I think at least I saw the presentation wasn't that significant. So I don't think the contracts in Area 6 is that important. Consent agenda is just
you're on the agenda. You said 15. I see 10.
Yeah, so the where they put in biased incident reporting was, I think, under board matters or something last time, and that's right before adjournment. So they haven't even gotten to new business yet. And they're covering legislative initiatives. Oh, one thing I would add is there is there's school choice legislation. Somebody's putting it forward in the House of Delegates. But anyways, that's worth keeping an eye on. I'm sure that's not on their legislative priorities, but it should be on ours.
Mm-hmm. Board matters, 20 minutes. Yeah.
They get the legislative program twice, 305, and then they have it down, I think, as a new action item, 603. But most of the action items are just like contracts, right? It doesn't seem to me that significant. Consent agenda,
it seems like we need to like check in around like 10:40.
Yeah, that's very late.
It is late. I mean, this is like the time. Maybe this is like the time we bring in the more, moving forward, like the open community our participant discussion to see what people are talking about. Apparently, we were mentioned today during the community participation.
Oh,
like we're famous. Like we got it. I know,
yeah.
right?
we're famous. Sometimes I think people. There are certain people who I just think they're miserable generally, and they're kind of like pressure cookers, and their misery has to seep out and be directed towards something. And these are the people who always come off seeming venomous, and everybody in life knows these people. And when I see them, I just feel so sad for them. Like I feel so sorry for them because I think like.
Don't you feel flattered that people have to seek fame by being in such proximity to you specifically?
But the funny, it's not even personal. It's like if it's not you, it's somebody, right? It's people who are like. They're seeking fame, or they're somehow dissatisfied, and they need a target to feel whole, or they need the anger to feel alive. And a lot of these people have children, and it just makes you really feel sad for their children. I mean, I don't know, but I mean, there are only so many hours in a day. But just all poisonous people in general, I just feel sad for them. Like I wish them the best. But like it is true, isn't it? Like poison in the venom needs to seep out of that pressure cooker apparently, and they find a target. Sometimes they find a lot of targets.
Oh, so they recessed. Even the board needs a break.
Yeah, the board is like they were supposed to adjourn at 9:15. It's crazy.
They were.
But yeah, I'm happy we can adjourn this and then come back and talk about what they've done. I mean, I'll still end up watching
let us adjourn. I can get some dinner. The shadow board will adjourn. We will motion to adjourn.
Robert's rules motion.
Robert's rules motion to adjourn. We will come back. Do you really want to see
how old are those comments on the YouTube? I haven't been paying attention to those. Are those recent or are those?
I posted. Yeah, like they're pretty good. Like one person asked, "Can we vote them out?" Fairfax County's pretty blue. Okay. I think there's a lot of people who care about education and would be willing to vote them out. Especially if you're like more of a centrist. Because this is not, this is education. A lot of parents we have common cause on some of these issues. And then someone mentioned a comment about the upcoming election, and I mean that's not really related to schools, even though they both have commented on it. In this case, it's like, this is, when you start seeing them race to the bottom, their school district, that's, a lot of parents are going to have, I mean, we all moved here for the schools. We overpaid for our homes. That was part of the contract. We didn't have to pay, so we'd have to pay for private school. And then they're doing this to it. It's kind of like, they're ruining they are ruining our investment, and they are like, they're cheating our kids. I mean, this is like, heck, I'd move to Hawaii or something like that, just somewhere with nice weather where I don't have to live in a swamp with its heavy congestion.
The free state of Florida.
I heard.
Yeah, the free state of Florida.
Hawaii schools aren't the best. Yeah, the free state. There's
they're not the best, right?
So state income tax, yeah. I talked to a person, a man from New Mexico told me that they were ranked like 50th, and I was like, wow. I mean, I don't know what property values are like in New Mexico, but I'm guessing you could, like, if you lived there, it would be cheaper, and then you could just send your kids to private school. I'm sure the climate is nice. So
exactly, you know,
New Mexico people.
New Mexico. I don't think I'd go out west, but you know, Tennessee. Yeah, I can rock that. You know, no income tax.
I can do
yeah.
Tennessee. All right, so motion to adjourn for now. It's been fun as always.
Yeah, are we gonna check back in here in about? Do we want to see where they are at 10:40 or what? Because you know that's when they're gonna do all the. Watch. Here's what's gonna happen. We're gonna adjourn. We're gonna come back at 10:40. Like, what happened? And then you realize what's gonna happen. They're watching this, and they're gonna come back. It's like, we're gonna change the agenda so we can go through all our shady stuff now. I'm willing to bet that's gonna happen. Let's check.
Because they would have to be on the new agenda. They'd have to suspend the rules. So, I mean, they're going to come and say.
They did suspend the rules last time. They did. They did. Yeah.
But, no, I mean, if y'all want to come back, I'll come being for that.
Yeah, let's come back. Yeah, let's come back. Let's adjourn right now. Let's come back. Let's check back at 10:40.
Okay.
Or I'll check back in at 10:40. All right.
I'll probably
Shadow
still be
board
up.
is adjourning. I'll still be up. I'll check back in, but yeah, I can stretch out. All right.
Yeah, I got work.
See everybody. Do you want to call it a night then, or what?
No. I mean, we can come back. It's just like I don't work for the schools. We actually have work.
Okay, you got your real job. Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, we all do. All right, let's adjourn. All right, I'll see you guys in about 40 minutes. All right.
Later,
Okay.
guys.
See you then.
Hey, everybody. Tonight's show is going to go ahead and wrap up. I want to remind everyone to please stay tuned next month for the next Shadowboard and Harry Jackson's Education Matters right here on USANow.tv.